Erin, you are muted.
Of course I am. All right, thank you. Good morning and welcome to H-GAC's annual Disaster Debris Workshop. I'm Erin Livingston with H-GAC. The Tetra Tech team will be presenting today and has a lot of great information to make sure you're prepared for the next time that a disaster does hit. But before we get started, I'd like to go over some general notes about logistics for this webinar this morning. So first, this meeting is being recorded. Microphones will be muted and cameras will be turned off throughout the presentations. If you're on the phone and unmuted, please go ahead and mute your phone. We will be monitoring for questions throughout the webinar, so just type your questions in the chat box and we'll make sure to get those to the presenters. You can access the chat box by using the control bar at the bottom of the screen. To do so, click on the speaking bubble icon. You can also use the raise your hand function and we can unmute you so you can ask your question verbally. If you are on a handheld device, you can access the chat by clicking on the three dots on the lower side of your screen and choosing chat in the menu. If you are attending the webinar via telephone only and prefer to use your question to ask your question verbally, you can press *9 to raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute so that you can ask your question. If you have any issues at any time during the webinar, just type those into the chat box and either Andrea or Wendy will help you with those. If you are listening to the webinar with others in the room, we would like to fully capture who all is in attendance. So go ahead and type everyone's name into the chat box so that we can capture that information. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the Tetra Tech team and let them introduce themselves and get this webinar going.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Andrea and Cheryl and the entire H-GAC team and Wendy for organizing this really important and hopefully really impactful presentation today. I'm going to just take a moment to share my screen. It's kind of akin to walking and chewing gum for me, so I want to make sure I don't trip and fall here. But I think we're good. Erin, are you able to see and hear me this morning?
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for your attendance and joining us here in this really important, with this really important topic. My name is John Burry. I am Director of Post-Disaster Programs for Tetra Tech, a native Houstonian, and work and live in Houston today. I'm proud to be a partner with H-GAC really since 2001, almost 20 years, when H-GAC undertook what has really become, has been a pillar of the community and industry with their first disaster debris study, looking at the effects and impacts on the landfill. My first consulting job with Reed, Stowe & Yankee, who many of you might be familiar with, and worked with the team at H-GAC to put that together, and really have been a part of many of the workshops that H-GAC has facilitated both in person and virtually over that time period. My background has been working with public sector clients in both debris management as well as other aspects of the recovery process, including disaster preparedness, continuity of operations, emergency support functions, some of that planning type work. In addition, working on post-disaster programs, both short and long-term, housing programs, infrastructure, Fema public assistance, and have been deployed to over 60 different disaster locations, worked with over 100 different communities in and around the US, and really have done a lot of work here in the Houston area. I've actually been here in Houston back in Houston for 15 years. And when I moved, I was newlywed with my wife, and she's small town Uvalde, and when we moved here to Houston, I told her, I said, listen, we're moving back for two reasons. Number one, Houston has two great airports. If I have to go to a disaster, I'll be able to do a direct flight. And then second thing is it's Houston, and there always seems to be, again, a disaster, and I was very fortuitous and have really done a lot of work here, and again, that's why we're here today, is to make sure that you all are prepared, looking at some of the trends in disaster recovery and emergency management, and like I said, I'm really excited here today. With me here, Brian Rutherford. I'll go ahead and allow him to turn his camera on and do a quick introduction.
Hello, I'm Brian Rutherford. Been with Tetra Tech for about 13 years. Done a lot of work with some of you communities out there. Live in Leak City, Texas. And so I've done a lot of work here locally. Done a lot of planning work. So I do a lot of disaster debris management plans. I've also done hazard mitigation, continuity of operations, quite a few public health related projects as well, because I used to work for the Galveston County Health District for a number of years, and prior to that, I worked with the state of Texas. So pleasure to be with you today, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Brian. And with the Tetra Tech team, we also have Matt Mooneyham.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I appreciate you all letting us spend some time with you this morning and going through this workshop and this webinar, and hopefully can offer some good information and some good insights to everybody, and everybody can take away some good information from this. So I'm about 5 years with Tetra Tech. I am a regional program manager. I specialize in debris monitoring, mostly working with local government clients. I am the odd man out. I don't live in Texas. However, I am in Texas quite often, working in those areas and helping those clients as well, just like John and Brian. I also have clients all across the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, into the panhandle of Florida, and even further down south. Really looking forward to spending some time with you guys this morning. Something unique that I bring to the table that I like to tell people is, before my time with Tetra Tech, I actually have about 8 years of local government experience as well. So I've seen things from the local government side as well. I kind of know what you're up against, what y'all are dealing with when it comes to dealing with the public and politics and politicians and so on and so forth. So I kind of bring a unique view to everything, and I've always had some good feedback from my clients as far as that goes. So I appreciate everybody having us on today, and hopefully you can take away some good information from this webinar.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt is from the Pensacola area, which was site to the Hurricane Ivan. Ike was Houston, Ivan. It's always the ice storms. Ivan in 2004, and decimated the Pensacola, Escambia County area, and did a great job there. With us also Meredith Sanders. Are you able to say a few words?
Hey, John, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Very good. Okay, well, I am also part of the Tetra Tech team. I focus on the public assistance program. Like Matt, I have a background working for local government, and previous to that, I worked with legal compliance, and I'm an attorney in the state of Texas as well. So very excited to be in the Houston area. I live in Harris County. So this is always near and dear to my heart when we work with the Houston Area Council group.
Thank you, Meredith. And finally, Don Olson. I see you're on. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, good morning. My name is Don Olson. I've probably worked with several of you folks. I'm a public assistance specialist, project manager. I've worked several projects with John Burry from Hurricane Ike, Hurricane Irene, Connecticut, several other disasters, the Tax Day, Memorial Day floods, Hurricane Harvey with the city of Houston. We're working COVID projects with Harris County and other folks. So specialize in the project formulation, getting things through the grants portal system, working with FEMA individuals, CRC, focusing on reimbursements, compliance reviews with the state affiliates. I am a Houstonian. and I've worked with John for several years, and then participated in this H-GAC conference before. Good morning.
Hey, thanks, Don and Meredith, Brian. And so what we're looking to do here is to bring the various disciplines and that really are a big part of the disaster recovery and the debris management process. And of course, you have Brian Rutherford. He's our planning guy. Meredith, legal compliance. Again, you got Don Olson, grants portal and project formulation, the Matt Mooningham, public works, and just the debris oversight operations. And so really this is like the A team. I don't think I'm Hannibal or anything like that, but I watch that. I'm a big A team fan, and I'll tell you that you have it here today. So if you do have questions, please drop them in the chat. Like I said, we're monitoring them, and we'd love to make this as interactive as possible. We've always been really lucky to have engaged participants, and I'm looking today, we have participants from the private sector. I've seen Ashbrit, one of the national debris haulers, probably with a great deal of experience here in Texas. So representatives from TxDOT. I've seen Sugarland, TxDOT at the state level, City Sugarland, and Glenn down in the city of Angleton. So coastal as well as mid-coast. So again, if you've got questions, you're something's on your mind, pop it in the chat, and we'll try to address it in real time. So let's go ahead and get started here. Again, thank you all for joining. So with some emergency, we're going to start out with some emergency trends in disaster recovery, talking about where we've been, where we are, where we're going, some public information strategies, and really looking at this idea of how do we get the information out to the public as quickly as we can and get the debris picked up. We're going to look at technology and how technology has really transformed the industry itself, and from everything from damage assessments to documentation. And then finally, best practices and preparedness initiatives. Look, we're 9 days in, 10 days, really 9 days into hurricane season, June 9th here. And we're staring down the barrel of the hurricane season. I've even seen some models, GFS, Euro, we start talking about a lot of those acronyms and those spaghetti models, if you will. And what we're here to do is look, if there's 10 things, if there's 5 things that you can do today to help prepare you for this next hurricane season, let's just look at them. Some light lift type stuff that you can focus on to prepare you for this year. So let's get started. Start with emerging trends in disaster recovery. And really, let's start with our most recent disaster. It kind of started out tongue-in-cheek talking about the number of disasters in the Houston area, but lo and behold, we had our winter storm here this past year, and really I was talking to one emergency manager for a large organization and said, look, John, we plan for hurricanes, we're planning for floods, we're planning for tornadoes, and we got walloped by this winter storm. And really, this, for those of you here in the area, but I also provide a little bit of background for those of you who may be joining us from outside the state of Texas, is what we saw in February of this year was incredible. With this winter storm bringing cold temperatures and snow and sleet, freezing rain, and really resulting in the massive power outages. I mean, really has been everything from the Houston Chronicle, Texas Tribune has really been focused on the historic winter storm coverage and how to make things better. You look at those 8 days and 23 hours and 23 minutes. We put that in there because I was counting the days, counting the minutes I like my winters in days and not months, is what I tell people when I visit them in the Northeast. And this one was a little bit too long for me. When you look at those winter advisories on February 11th and lasting all the way to the 20th, we had every square inch of Texas in the winter storm warning, which was just incredible. I sat down talking with my dad a couple of days before, and he recalled the 87, 89 ice storm. It was almost had some PTSD due to the pipe burst. And he said, John, be ready for this one. And you saw obviously Harris County Judge Hidalgo likening it to a hurricane, and really that Cat 5 that she had reported previously. So look at some of the low temperatures here, and everything from here in the Houston area to north of Houston, those single digits or low double digits degrees. Huntsville being 1. We're obviously used to seeing Huntsville being 101, or with at least a 9 in front of these single digit temperatures. And really just incredible as far as what the area experienced. You can see old cheetah crap there. And just a historic type of disaster, which has resulted in historic losses. One of the things you saw is the property damages estimated at $195 million. This is the single costliest insurance event in the state's history. Just from a straw poll of our staff in the Houston area, I think it was about 1 out of every I think it was 3 out of every 4 or 9 out of 10 had lost water. 10 out of 10 had lost power. And then probably about a third of those had some sort of pipes burst in their homes. Again, you're looking at those insurance losses being $20 billion, and the damage is really coming from those pipe bursts and some fire damage due to some electrical equipment. So just a tremendous event. You could see immediately after the disaster, the state of Texas did receive a declaration for this event. And I think it's really important, and really a lesson learned here is that when you see this type of declaration, especially coming out as quickly as it did, is you look at this right here on the right hand side. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor moving around, but you look at the public assistance categories and individual assistance public categories. I want to make sure you're paying special attention to category B, public assistance. This means that your emergency protective measures, some of the things you've done in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, will be covered. That's not necessarily debris operations. And in addition, individual assistance. And we say individual assistance, we're talking about assistance for individuals. Where you as local governments are eligible for the public assistance program, we have the individual assistance for those individuals who need some additional other needs assistance due to the disaster. So you saw those two things happen very, very early on, but then it's kind of been a slow period. And what we've seen, and before I get into the why and the who and about this disaster, I wanted to look at from a debris generating event. You've seen some communities, city of Houston, Harris County, who have set up self-hauling. That was something that was very popular, but in general, winter storms can really cause some havoc with debris operations. We've seen it in Arkansas. We've seen it up in the Northeast Texas area. We had done a very similar workshop like this for the East Texas Council of Governments over near Tyler, and in that area is a hotbed for these types of disasters. So in the immediate aftermath, obviously you see damages from water leaks, pipes that could be in the way of furniture, drywall, carpet, insulation, really those things that you might see from a flood. Perhaps kitchen and kitchen cabinetry. So you have that again, for those of you who are new to this or new to debris management, we consider that construction and demolition debris. And then you also have vegetation. And again, well, I've been deployed to a couple of ice storms in Altus, Oklahoma, or Oklahoma City, where you've got a twig off a Bradford pear or another type of tree, and that tree could be covered in ice. I know some of the largest vegetative debris missions that we've been a part of, and really that the country's ever seen, have come from ice storms and severe winter storms. You had those ice storms in Georgia and South Carolina in 2015, in Augusta, which took down the Eisenhower tree right before the Masters there. You've had some in Oklahoma, Kentucky, where it's millions and millions of cubic yards. And obviously you've got here a photo from the city of Friendswood, which had a curbside debris collection operations. And that's really how impacted the communities have been. So, however, with that being said, we do not have a disaster declaration. And that's really been a challenge for public assistance. And I've asked Don, Olson, and Meredith to join us here today because they've really been on the front lines of working with our state and federal partners. And I wanted to talk through some of those things, really first talking about some of the debris issues and some of the challenges there, what limits you have to get to, and then beyond that, into this idea of emergency versus permanent repairs. So Meredith?
Thanks, John. I think that what we found, and this isn't necessarily just unique to the winter storm, but when we're looking at what we need to get these expanded declarations, the level of documentation and what's being asked for from both TTM and Fema is a whole new level of early documentation. Now, I'm not saying that this is new documentation that we wouldn't have to provide. And this really is anything covering category A through G. So not just debris related and not just the permanent work, but all categories of work, because what they're trying to do is quantify that dollar amount to meet threshold. And we're having almost a preliminary eligibility review to meet that dollar threshold. So instead of having 6 months to gather contract information and other data, we're really seeing that being required in 6 weeks. We had some extensions with the winter storm, and we continue to have extensions to gather this documentation. But this is also the same process we saw down in South Texas for Hurricane Hannah. So this isn't something that is new to the state of Texas. And we do absolutely believe that this is going to be something we're going to see moving forward. Now, I'm not going to say that when we see a huge storm like a Harvey come through, that we're going to have to go out and try to quantify to hit these thresholds to get these expanded declarations. However, from our conversations with TTM, they've really described it as a CNN damage assessment. So the idea is that if we have enough damage that you can see it on CNN and they know that it's going to be a severe enough, or it's been a severe enough storm, we won't have to go through that process. But to anticipate that this is something we're going to have to deal with for every major disaster moving forward, that may be on the line for a threshold. So just something to keep in mind. And Don, I know that you had some other comments. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, for those of you who are joining, and I had a chance to see that we got some folks from the Panhandle, down in the Golden Crescent, as well as Galveston County, LaPorte, West University Place. So it's a great, I know this disaster has touched a lot of different individuals. And that's what I think, the big takeaway from here is, number one, the damage assessments, as Meredith said, is a critical step in this process. That's debris estimations, that's getting the information into the PSTAT tool, which we'll talk about, the acronym that you'll find out more about later, the damage assessment, request for public assistance, all of these things, we've got to have these down. We as a community here need to have these down wiretight, because just the, hey, it's bad, trust us, isn't happening. Even Hurricane Laura, which was the Category 5 hurricane that impacted Lake Charles and Calcasieu Parish, just east of Beaumont, Port Arthur, and the Orange area, Golden Triangle. That took time. We were happy to be working with the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, and even the state of Louisiana, which is really Texas, Louisiana, on the Mount Rushmore of disaster states who work day in, day out. We're still having some challenges, and felt like that goalpost was shifting, or it was really getting harder to, climb over. So what I will encourage everyone to do here is to understand what you have, what your damages are, and that's infrastructure, that's debris, that's your emergency protective measures, and pushing that information earlier. One of the other things that we found was, and I went the wrong way here, is the emergency repair versus the permanent repair. And you can see here, obviously debris, that's pretty cut and dry. That's category A in most cases. But there is something that I'm sure some of you are dealing with right now in this disaster, and will have to deal with in future disasters, is this idea of emergency versus permanent repairs. And for that, Don, if you are still on the line here, not sure if you could unmute. I'd love for you to provide some perspective on this and some things to watch out for. And if he's having trouble, Meredith, I don't know if you.
No, I'm here. No, I'm here, John.
Oh, hey, okay. Don is the Yoda of our team when it comes to emergency versus permanent repairs in the grants portal process. And so I'd like to have you say a few words about some of the challenges here and what maybe some best practices, what people might want to do here.
Sure, I can't do a good Yoda voice, but these are not the damages you're looking for. Okay, so the difference between emergency and permanent. Now, according to FEMA policy, if they're permanent in nature, it's permanent work. So when we're dealing with, like, for example, if we're dealing with a pipe burst and things like that, you have to stop the water. Water is always going to win and cause more damage. You must stop that damage. But if you're repairing pipes back to pre-disaster condition, you're actually performing permanent repairs. And the challenge for this, for example, if you had a contractor on hand to do this, to respond to this, to stop the water, from spreading, they come in and do the pipe fix and the cleanup and things like that. And well, the cleanup can be considered the category B, the emergency work, but then there's the permanent work that's associated with that. So if you get an invoice that includes both of those, then you're kind of running into the situation where you have to split between categories of work on an invoice. Now, then you're dealing with cost threshold issues. So if your costs fall under $3,100, that's an ineligible project. So if you had a valid project with a total cost of, let's say, $6,000 to $7,000, you had a good small project. But if you have to split that out between two categories of work, then you're dealing with no recoverable dollars. And that's the challenge, to see how we can work with the state and FEMA on this when we're dealing with, hey, we had to stop the water from spreading. We fixed the pipe. The pipe was probably a $10 problem, but led to, a few $1,000s of interior damages or whatever the case may be. So the challenge right now is to really identify the emergency repair piece of this when we're dealing with pipe bursts, even though that, in fact, the repairs may be permanent in nature.
Don, you bring up a really good point. And what I was going to say is the communication has to be there for this to be successful, and understanding and being transparent with the costs that you have, and just understanding it. But I love what Don said. Look, this pipe may be a $10 problem, but it's led to a $50,000 problem or a $20,000 problem, depending on where and what part of the system is. But but for those of you who are out there who are going through this process and dealing with it, this is not unique to you. This is something that many communities across the state are dealing with, and some of the challenges. And we're still very much in the early stages of this disaster. As Meredith Sanders mentioned, we're still in the process of the damage assessment and trying to reach those thresholds. I believe, you may have disasters are all different. You may have a disaster like Hurricane Harvey, which, immediately gets a disaster declaration and you're off and running. But a lot more of them are like this, where it could take weeks, months, and you may not see a declaration for, I think the last one was 164 days or 146 days, something quite substantial, and it does take time. And then, again, that's just part of the process. I think a big piece of this, again, another key takeaway, I had a professor at UT that said, the important stuff you want them to remember is tell them once, tell them what you told them, and tell them again. Damage reporting is that for this new and emerging trends, okay? You have the state of Texas, which has deployed the Public Assistance State of Texas Assessment Tool, or PSTAT. This is a tool new for 2021, new for the disaster, or new really the broadest use of this. I believe it was used previously in some other ones, but this PSTAT tool is a survey tool which allows local governments to capture photos, locations, estimates at damaged facilities, debris estimates, and other disaster-related damages. Again, this goes back to more detail being needed up front, and this is the tool to do so. One of the things I'll say, and I was going to ask Don and Meredith to chime in here, because this is certainly something that they were very familiar with over the last 3 or 4 months here. But moving to electronic reporting, we've seen that in the industry, and electronic data collection has been an emerging trend for a while. But this whole reliance on getting the information out there, getting it through the PSTAT tool, is a process, and it's something that I think local governments need to be aware of. And maybe there's some things, Meredith or Don, you could share as far as lessons learned as people step into this next hurricane season.
Absolutely, John. So this is one of those situations where, as I mentioned before, we need to make sure we're gathering that documentation as quickly as possible and putting it into this PSTAT tool as fast as we can. Now, what the state is doing is they're taking all the data entered by the jurisdictions, and that's for all categories of work, debris through category G, and you get a chance to kind of delineate in there. When you enter the information, you include photos. You have to have photos. You have to know addresses as best you can. And when you put that data in, it rolls up, it gives the state the understanding of what does our dollar amount look like. That's what they hand over to FEMA. FEMA does that early eligibility review, and that's how we get the declaration. The longer it takes for this data to go into the PSTAT tool, the longer it's going to take to get this declaration. So moving forward for especially these storms without the Harvey level impact, this is how we're going to make sure we can get that funding source nailed down quickly. Don, did you have anything to add? I know you did a lot with the PSTAT as well.
No, I think it's an excellent tool because you can access it from your phone. All your facility managers can go out individually for their respective disciplines and record this data. It's a very simple tool to use to put all of your things together. And I think what would really be helpful for this is a good training on this. You know, if this is one thing that's here to stay in a new policy and new procedures, it's an excellent tool that anybody can access, and it's a live document to be able to get all of your initial data in, especially photos. You know, because now this is more of a desktop inspections now, getting TDM and FEMA the information digitally and getting as much pictures, you know, dimensions, you know, the types of damages that you have, and getting that into that tool. So I think it's a user-friendly tool. You just go through and answer questions to the best of your ability. When it comes to the estimates, it's going to be your best guess estimate, or if you actually have some estimates from your folks, those types of things. And then the maintenance record piece of this is key too, is being able to establish what that facility was like before the event. And sometimes that's a challenge to know that, okay, this facility is regularly maintained and we didn't have, you know, for example, if we're dealing with, you know, water intrusion and things like that. But the winter storm, of course, we're dealing with temperature. It's not like a wind event, but if you're dealing with hurricanes and floods and things like that, to know what the condition of that facility was. So those are the types of documentation you'll need on the front end as well, to prove that those facilities were regularly maintained. But it is a user-friendly tool.
And Don, going back to the trainings, and for those of you who did have, you know, were engaged in the FEMA public assistance process for the winter storm, the state was doing daily trainings, I believe 7 days a week for the first couple of weeks, but they were doing daily trainings and again, 1.5 hours providing some technical assistance. And I mean, this is something that we had seen coming really since 2011. And we moved over to a digital platform, doing a lot of this work in the industry. And we first started with an Esri-based program. Then we looked at Survey 123. which is again another Esri ArcGIS based program. And then we've now settled on iForm. And I'm not, peddling a certain software platform, because I know there's a lot out there. But and that's why I'm saying this, is there's a ton out there. So, for those of you who are looking at, you might look at an app, very low cost solution. I mean, yes, there's some license fees, but they're a couple of $100 or $100 or less, not a couple of thousand. They're in the hundreds, not the thousands. You've got the PSTAT tool, which is a free tool. Those seats are, not charged to you. This is something that's maintained by the state of Texas, but you need to be aware that when it comes to infrastructure, you're looking at capturing the data. The big chief in the number 2 pencil is not going to be the way to go. It's going to be, again, phone, tablet, electronic mediums out there. Again, we're all emergency managers in some respects, so we all have to have that backup, that plan B. But your plan A really should be talking to your public works department and talking to your project managers or the various whoever is responsible for doing that in your community, whether it's debris or whether it is public facilities, parks, water, wastewater treatment plants. Having a plan to capture this data electronically, I can't say that enough. All right. So where we are at is we are at about 30 minutes into our presentation today, and we're going to take a break at 10 a.m. this morning. We're going to do, so we're going to go for about an hour and a half. We're going to take a short break. We're going to get back into it, take another short break to turn phone calls, bio break, and what have you. But we're going to keep going here, and then we're going to wrap things up right around 11:30. So again, we're really thankful that everybody's here today. I see we caught a few more participants on here. Valerie Blanton has joined here, and thank you for joining. Valerie is truly, one of those individuals who's been around debris and working debris for many, many years with the state of Texas, the queen of debris here. So Valerie, anytime you want to step in, pop something in the chat. We'd love to have your perspective on this, and really can't thank you enough for taking time. So next is the importance of taking an all hazards approach to disaster preparedness and debris management. So again, for those of you, who are in the Houston area, you're certainly very familiar with this, but we have no doubt had our wide range of threats. I mean, heck, you look a couple of weeks ago with the amount of rain we had, you saw some of those numbers in the Winnie and in some of those East Texas areas. You saw in Lake Charles, again, some areas of that area had historic, I don't want to say near record flooding, or over 15 inches. I saw the article there with the community, the area in Southeast Texas where their home is flooded 4 times since 2017, since Hurricane Harvey. And so you look at all these are not just hurricane events, but they really truly need an all hazards approach for this region. So when you're looking at debris, understanding what is out there. So an all hazards approach, what do we mean when we say that? It's taking that integrated approach to focus on capacities and capabilities. What do you have the resources for? What do they know how to do, which are critical to addressing the wide range, the spectrum of disasters and emergencies. That could be man-made emergencies or natural hazards. Could be the winter storm, could be the hurricane, could be the storm surge, could be the wind, the flooding, or it could be a drought like we saw in 2011 that led to wildfires and led to millions of dollars of debris in places like Bastrop, in the Tri-County fire just north of Harris County. And so again, you got to keep that mindset and approach. Again, we're looking at these environmental hazards and look at your operational disruptions, look at your environmental impacts, coordinate with your emergency management, coordinate with public works, legal. This is a whole community recovery, and it's really a whole planning effort that needs to be addressed. there are a ton of resources here in the Houston-Galveston area. And again, I'll make a plug for the Houston-Galveston Area Council, having been a leader in this subject matter since 2001 and providing assistance and guidance to the communities in the 13 county planning region. There is jurisdictional hazard mitigation plans that the COG has spearheaded, as well as local ones that have been a part of the local planning efforts, where you're looking at past events, looking at your hazard profile, your vulnerability assessments, your HIVA, your HIRA, all those sorts of things. What are those areas that you're going to be addressing? One of the things we've seen in the positioning and in Fema and some of the guidance that's come out recently is really this equity framework. And this is really something that's come out, and we've seen it in debris management, where, and I believe there was an article in the Chronicle of the New York Times yesterday, where it clearly stated that the low to moderate income populations are more adversely affected by disasters, or more commonly affected than you see in other areas. We saw it in Hurricane Matthew in 2016, which impacted some of the tribal areas, the Lumbee Indians in Lumberton, North Carolina, or some of the low to moderate income populations in some of those low-lying areas. Saw it in areas across the Houston-Galveston area, and understanding where those are. And I think that really does follow through from your operations all the way through your public information and how you approach disaster debris management. So again, something that you look at pretty closely, or I think we're seeing more and more communities look at the equity framework and how to serve all residents and understanding where debris would be occurring. Again, the disaster debris management plan, and Brian, I'm going to ask you to step in. I know you've been spearheading a lot of our debris planning efforts here within the Houston area, as well as the state of Texas. I know you were doing some just in DeSoto and some of the areas south of San Antonio. Maybe kind of share some of your perspective on the planning efforts and the debris estimation process.
Yeah, so the if you have a disaster debris management plan, it can be a very great tool to help you in planning. The whole idea there is to know what you might be dealing with as far as debris amounts, and what you might be dealing with is regarding the types of debris. And so, having that idea and having that written down can really help you as a planning tool. So you can know, so what are you going to be dealing with? How much debris are we talking about? Remember Jack Colley would always say, how bad is bad? It's kind of that situation. So you can kind of get an idea of how bad can be as far as dealing with debris and what you're going to have to, might have to manage. And so, using those tools with your disaster debris management plan, you can also have some idea and come up with some ideas on how you're going to deal with it, where you're going to put it. If you have some disaster debris management sites, where those are going to be, how you can reduce those debris, those debris quantities. So anyway, it's just a good planning tool if you have one in place to help you to deal with what the possibilities are, looking at some real world scenarios that could occur, and give you some good ideas of how much you're going to be dealing with. Another aspect there is too, working with your contractors, so if you have a debris management plan and you have debris contracts set up, working with some of those folks and some of your planning partners to coordinate with them in planning for disposal, working with your solid waste haulers and your disaster debris haulers as well. And then working with them to do some of those things, talk through those scenarios and what their resources are, how quickly they can respond. And they'll even show up and work with you on training and conducting exercises, those kind of things.
I'll tell you, and I asked Matt Mooneyham to step in here because I know he's done a lot of these, but one of the things I'll tell you is the meeting with the contractors. I can't underscore that enough. As you step into this hurricane season, please, reach out. I know a lot of, communities are looking at that right now, and you have approaches like a city of Friendswood did in years past. We bring everybody together, and that's police, fire, EMS, telecom, and just debris is part of that. I know that's something that Brian Mansfield and the team down there have continued. Or it could be more of a scenario-based discussion where you're sitting in a room here and like pictured there, where it's more of an exercise. I know even in Fort Bend County, they've in the past, Scotty Weat has brought trucks in, but one of the things I'd say is that turnover exists, and the emergency managers or some of the other staff may not be there. Some of the debris staff are not going to be there. But again, Matt, I know you've done a lot of these. Is there one style type that you've found more successful than another when it comes to engaging with your contractors?
Yeah, I mean, we've done them so many different ways, John. I mean, this is one of the things, I'll be honest with you, from my standpoint, and talking about debris and debris operations and debris planning, this is probably the most valuable tool that you can have. We love to do these. I put on a ton of these every single year in the off season, right there prior to hurricane season, prior to getting into it hot and heavy. This is also one of the major benefits of having those pre-negotiated contracts with both your contract hauler and also your monitoring company. You have the opportunity to get those guys involved. You have an opportunity to get familiar with those contractors. Your staff becomes familiar with them, and vice versa. Those contractors are familiar with your staff. And I mean, it's just so helpful when if you do get that disaster, if you do get that event and there is an activation, you come in and you hit the ground running, and you're not making introductions at the EOC, 12 hours after landfall, and everybody's trying to meet everybody and exchange contact information and become familiar with everybody and everything on such short notice. So what we love to do here is get everybody together. What you see there, that little picture there is obviously some sort of hurricane exercise scenario type, which is something that we do quite often for a lot of our clients. Is we put together a simulated event. It's a hurricane, whatever it may be. We'll put a name to this storm. It'll be a Category 4, and we walk through the whole timeline of that storm, and we love to get all the different in communities. All different departments involved. It's not just that we do primarily focus on the debris side of things, because that's what we do, but we love to get everybody involved. In other words, the accounting department, hey, what are you doing? 2 hours prior to landfall, what's the accounting department doing? What are you doing with your staff? What are you doing as far as setting up codes, tracking for man hours and time and material and equipment hours and that sort of thing. Public works, what are you doing? Are you getting sandbags ready? Are you, and you walk through that, 3 or 4 days ahead of the event or landfall. And then you've got, the day before landfall, you've got 24 hours after landfall. And we run through these scenarios, and it gives everybody an opportunity to not only discuss it, but to put some questions. We throw some curveballs in there, say, hey, so all of a sudden this hurricane, it's spun off multiple tornadoes in this area of town. So what are we going to do there? How is that going to impact us? Do we have a debris management site over in that area? We've had a larger influx of C&D, construction and demolition material over in that area. Do we have a DMS that's pre-permitted, that's permitted to take that C&D material there? There's all these kind of scenarios, and we love to do that. We love to throw some curveballs in there, but it gets everybody talking. It gets everybody asking questions. Hopefully you can work the kinks out there and say, hey, maybe, oh man, we didn't think about that. We need to, hey, after this scenario, let's regroup on this issue or that issue, and let's see what we can do to kind of prevent that in the future. And once again, it just all comes back to preparedness. The more prepared you can be, the better. And I tell you, these preseason events are just, to me, they're priceless, and we love doing them. And if somebody wants more information on any of that stuff, I'll be happy to share stuff that we've put together, scenarios we've run through. But anyway, John, like you said, they're just, in my opinion, one of the most valuable things you can do off season or preseason, if you will.
Yeah, and we're we're doing it next week in concert with the National Hurricane Conference that is going to be in New Orleans. We're doing our annual tabletop exercise, going with El Jefe as a theme. They were kind enough to name it after me. We've done some Hurricane Diablo in the past, and again, hey, and another thing is being able to get back out there with conferences. I'm really excited about that. The National Hurricane Conference in New Orleans next week I think is going to be a great way to reconnect, understand what are some changes. I think they're going to be talking everything from COVID to debris to just general trends that are out there with FEMA. So again, just knowing what's out there and planning for it, you can't stress that enough. So then again, I'm talking emerging trends here, and we've got a lot of familiar faces. The Lee Crowders of the world that are on here, thank you for joining. To the Lawrence Shishkas of the world, actually my cousin, he's on there out in Sealy. Excited, I haven't seen you before, so we appreciate everybody who is again, new faces and old. And one of the things I want to say is everybody's got a different skill level, knowledge level, and we're going to try to keep this to not only keep those who are new to disaster debris management engaged, but also interested with some of the higher order type of topics that it may get a little bit in the weeds here. I mean, you heard Don talking, a grants portal and down to the contracted level. But so we're gonna, if we lose you, we're gonna try to catch up real quick, and we'll find you in no time flat. So disaster declarations. When we talk disaster declarations, it's that process of the federal government allowing for FEMA to offer their public assistance program. There are certain thresholds that exist, not only for the state of Texas, but for your individual county that must be met in order for a federal disaster declaration to be achieved. One of the things, again, going back to the winter storm, is that the disaster declaration threshold, the way FEMA is approaching this, is that the disaster threshold for all the category B work cannot go against the disaster declaration threshold for the future and the C through G type activities. So when you have insurance, when you have some of these nuance level things, it's important to talk to your state partners, to talk to other communities that are involved in this, the finance departments, or maybe even those in the private sector that have some experience and perspective in the disaster recovery process. Again, as you heard Don mention earlier, as well as Meredith, it's really important to keep those detailed records in the event of the disaster. And even if it isn't declared for 180 days or 120 days, chances are it will be, especially here within the state of Texas. When it comes to debris, it's important to keep those force account labor records, which is your time and materials. That may be disaster timesheets for your community, as well as Chronos or whatever timekeeping system that your particular jurisdiction is implement. You want to look at any expenses that you have associated with it and tying back that equipment use. In addition, you could be looking at contractor expenses. You'd see here some contracted vehicles doing some debris operations along the right-of-way. Again, eligible work, but we just need the disaster declaration. So again, you look at those tweener type events, the winter storms, the Hurricane Imeldas, the Hurricane Hannah that Meredith had mentioned earlier. Those are the type of events where you really, as a jurisdiction, need to work with your finance department, need to work with your operations team to capture those information, or capture the information and begin as soon as you can. Again, even if we don't have a disaster declaration immediately, that information will go to that process. Again, when it comes to disaster declarations, I can't stress enough procurement. It wouldn't be a workshop, it wouldn't be a seminar like this without throwing in some information about procurement. And when you look at tribal and local governments, non-federal entities or NFEs, you look at those procurement requirements, which making sure that they're following their own documented procedures, applicable local laws, state laws, and 2 CFR 200. Title 2, the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 200. 2 CFR 200 is one of those things where, I got to get that tattooed right on my arm, right over mom. I think it'll cover her nicely, because that's how, it's not quite as important as mom, but super important out there when doing disasters and working with your legal team, working with your procurement disaster assistance team that FEMA has, having some technical assistance when it comes to procurement. Again, even in spite of disaster declaration, it's really, really critical. Again, when you look at contracts, all those being through the competitive procured process, one of the things we've seen recently, really in 2017, is this idea of exigent and emergent. That's a term used by FEMA to really bypass the competitive procurement process. We've seen it with COVID. The idea that the public health declaration exists, and therefore an emergent and exigent circumstance exists, and therefore the procurement laws can be circumvented in certain situations. But again, when you're looking at those contracted costs, look at the scope of work, look at the units that you are going to be billed for, whether it's cubic yard basis, which is generally commonly how these procurements are pulled together, or tonnage, if you do have a contract like that. Again, staying away from those hourly based contracts outside that first response period. And again, any of those costs must be fully documented. Again, as you go through the disaster declaration process, as you heard Don Olson say, more and more of this documentation is needed earlier on in the process. So regardless of where you are in the disaster, having the documentation is critical. Again, you look at the 2 CFR 200 here, essential elements, that's that checklist. You could go online to FEMA Procurement Disaster Assistance Team. Again, Google it or put it in your search engine, Microsoft Edge, whatever you use. FEMA Procurement Disaster Assistance Team. They have a wealth of information. They do some online seminars. They do some online. I know some communities have reached out to them and requested. They have a 1 and a 3 hour session for you to participate in. And it hits all these different things: financial records, proof of insurance, bonding, cost analysis. Did you do all these things? Where is the artifact? This is almost like buying a house. You gotta have everything. This is not buying a house pre-2008 where the documentation requirements. Think about it now, and that's the level of documentation that we're really looking at. Again, force account costs, having those records available, making sure that they are fully documented, and the staff hours related to the disaster, overtime, straight time, volunteer hours. Keeping those records early. And Matt, you mentioned you were on the public sector side here. How was that working with your field teams? You guys, you're driving the trucks. Any sort of strategies, any sort of things that you've seen work well, especially early on, to capture that documentation?
Yeah, absolutely. You get these events and you get hit or whatever the case may be, and everybody's going every different direction. That is not the time to start trying to implement new methods, new procedures, new paperwork, whatever the case may be. The time to talk about that stuff is now. Most local entities nowadays, I won't say all, but most have some sort of, everybody calls it something different, but I would like to call it maybe like a work order type based system, which gives them the ability to track those man hours, which is very, very important. And not only just tracking the man hours themselves, but tying those to the equipment, whether it be this John Doe was driving truck number 1003 and he was operating a chainsaw number, whatever it may be. You've got to tie those hours, those man hours, you've got to tie them to not only the equipment that they were utilizing, but they need to know where they were, what they were doing, what job they were tasked with. A lot of times that ties into the work order system. A lot of times that can also tie in, you heard our team talk about this a little earlier, is maintenance records as well. So a lot of this all ties together, and it gives you, it's the ability to say, they were over there working on this, let's use, for example, some utilities. They were over there working on this lift station, and this does belong to us. This is one of our lift stations, and here's our maintenance records of those lift stations. Those are questions you're going to be asked. So these repairs, whether it be a new lift station, repairs to the old one, whatever it may be, you're going to have to show that you were actively maintaining that system prior to the event. So a lot of times it ties all that together, but I can't stress enough being prepared and talking about those things prior to these events. Something else I'll mention in here, and maybe one of you guys, maybe John, can expand on this, but something we've seen time and time again, I've seen it when I worked for local governments, and I've seen it again now, is look at your payroll policies. Look at those and review them and make any adjustments or amendments to those prior to any major events. A lot of times what you'll see is maybe there's a very vague, or it's just not clear on what the overtime is or how it's paid, if it's paid, at what amount is it paid, if it is eligible. After an event is not the time to start making adjustments to those payroll policies and paying things that were not covered previously. That's something that I've seen some local governments get burned on in the past. And it's just something that's, once again, being prepared and talking about these things pre-season is so important. And I would put that on your checklist as you're talking about pre-negotiated contracts and you're talking about all these things we're harping on. Look at those payroll procedures, look at those payroll policies and see, do they apply? If, in this winter storm, or if we got hit by a tornado or a hurricane, are these still applicable? And if not, what do we need to do to tweak these and adjust them to make them fit to what we need them to do?
Matt, you bring up a great point, and I want to make sure those in emergency management or in whoever is responsible for submitting the paperwork to FEMA understands your work order system. Okay, I mean, Matt, you hit the nail square on the head because that can really make or break the ability for a community to get reimbursed. Because again, that job order system, work order system, whatever it is, making sure people are aware of that and understand how that works is beyond just the operational agency and into the financial and administrative aspects is a big piece of this. And then finally, the payroll policy itself, again, not something you want to jimmy with. A resource out there, we talk about what various resources is the FEMA Second Appeals database. Again, something you put in your search engine browser and can check out there. But FEMA and their Second Appeals is an online tool. I may bring it up at the break here, but something you want to see out there, and you could search for various topics. It could be payroll policy, and see how FEMA has treated this in other areas. I know there's been some situations where in the last 5-10 years where there have been these challenges. Again, I think another thing is being transparent with elected officials. Again, focused on that disaster declaration process. I know we've talked about a lot of post-disaster declaration activities, but really it's one and the same. And making sure you are transparent to make them understand what is and what isn't covered. What is it going to take to get it done? Is it going to take some congressional oversight or influence? Do you need to reach out to your state or federal representatives, and what are some of the things that you're going to need to do to get it back? Maybe not, listen, it's not going to be back into CNN. It's not going to be back on the 2 or 3 news cycles and they've moved on. But what is it going to be? What is it going to take to get it back into the front of people's minds? And how are we going to get this declared? Again, reporting damages to the state. We have the state of Texas STAR request process. I know that's something that if you are not familiar with it, I think it's something you should be, especially providing that assistance up through agencies like the Texas Department of Transportation. I know that they had provided some assistance for debris operations following Hurricane Harvey, and even prior to that, and previous disasters, and you look at the STAR request process and what it is. Again, it's that process to fill gaps. You look at the disaster district chairman, and stepping through that process, and starting from the local level, going through the disaster district, and then going to the state operations system that receives that request. The SOC, or the State Operations System, then will work with the state agencies to fill that request, or potentially other local governments. And Brian, I know you've been, again, had that history with Galveston County Health and working with a lot of local governments, but as well as emergency management. Is there any, again, some things to watch out for when you go through this process? Because I think it's a relatively easy process, but something that certainly needs to be followed.
Yeah, just when putting in requests, having a good idea of providing specific information as you can of the resources you need. When I was with the state, I would report to the disaster district committee and be in that room with those other people from other state agencies when the phone would ring and be going, oh gosh, please don't be for me. But anyway, we kind of dealt with those things, and we'd get those requests and try to deal with those the best we could, and then direct those, trying to find resources locally if we could, or in the region, to try to satisfy those requests, or forwarding them up. And so in some cases they may, in the case of a public health emergency, may have to go to the state medical operations center in the state health services, Department of State Health Services, or the Texas Forest Service, or just straight on to the State Operations Center, but working through those to try to satisfy those requests. And coming up, again, if you have a request, trying to narrow it down to say exactly what we need when you're trying to send those focused requests up, and kind of help with those folks who are trying to fill those requests to get those resources for you.
I talk about the Texas Forest Service. I know they've been a great asset following disasters, whether they're in Bastrop County, following the 2011 wildfire there, the Bastrop Complex fire, or Hurricane Ike, which impacted City of Galveston, where you had saltwater killed trees in both the City of Galveston as well as Galveston County, and them being a resource to help identify those trees, the mortality of those trees, and survivability. So again, it could be, hey, we need more trucks, or we need some really smart people who know, that sort of type of subject matter and how things are going to be approached. So again, PSTAT tool, we talked about that a little bit earlier, the public assistance, the state of Texas assessment tool. Again, that survey tool, again, once the damage is submitted up through the process, that will help you get through that declaration process. I won't belabor this point. We certainly talked about it earlier, but for those of you maybe to join late, the PSTAT tool is something I certainly would recommend reaching out, getting a training on it, talking about it, and spreading it out within your organization. Listen, when it comes to damage assessments, keeping those detailed records, that is a trend that we are seeing more and more in this process. And again, what sort of pictures can you get? Is it assets prior to disaster? Is it drone? We're having, again, into the presentation, just a little teaser. We're going to go into some of the technology and how drones, or how electronics and technology are being integrated into the disaster recovery process. Could be roof assessments, before and after pictures. Tremendous. We know we've done some communities who have done PCI, pavement condition indexes. They do building assessment indexes, roof assessment, anything prior to hurricane season. We've seen some communities that's just part of their process. It's update your plan, find your debris management sites, take pictures of your assets. Also, pre-surveying trucks, pre-surveying, getting the volumetric capacity of those vehicles so they can quickly go out there and how much is being hauled. Again, something to consider through that process. Again, when you're doing this damage assessments, get the information quickly, do some front end work to get, know where the areas are, but do more detail in the past. Matt, I know you've been a part of a lot of debris assessments and damage assessments. I mean, anything share here as far as best practices. I'd love to get your perspective on what things to watch out for. What do you think you as a contractor is going to need? I mean, I know they're going to be doing their own they're doing their own debris assessments, but what can you as a local government be watching out for at this time?
Well, yeah, I think you just, number one, I think you hit the nail on the head with where are the damages? You're familiar with your area. You're familiar with what areas, maybe it's a flooding event, let's say, hey, historically, this is where the flooding is going to occur. This is where the damages are going to be, or over here on the south end of the county, or the south end of the city, or up here in the Northeast is, we've got that neighborhood over there. That's going to help you prioritize where those damage assessments. I'm not saying you don't need to do an assessment over the entire area, but where to send those teams to get at least the bulk of those damages, or where the worst are going to be and occur. Being familiar with the area and where those damages could occur is it's critical. You're not spending time chasing your tail, going and driving areas of the city or the county that are maybe got little to no damage at all. In some instances, though, it can be quite an undertaking to go out there and assess the entire county or the entire city. It's important to identify in your preseason preparedness who's going to do those assessments. What team is going to be tasked with, let's say, the debris assessment. So as soon as it's safe to do so, and as soon as your staff reports back to work, let's get out there in the streets and let's see what we've got out there. What parts of the city, what parts of the county were hardest hit? What are those teams? Who are they going to be? Number one, and more importantly, is what does that team look like? Is it one man in a truck? Is it two men in a truck? One's driving and one's taking notes. One's taking pictures on his phone, to help document some of these damages. It's very important to identify that right off the get-go, preseason even. That way, when it comes time to do it and everybody's tasked, it's go. You're on the streets and you're doing it. It helps to do what we do in the debris business, to zone out. To zone out the city or the county, whatever the case may be, and that way, everybody, you're not duplicating efforts. Something that we see, obviously not on purpose, but this same team assessed this exact same area. They didn't know, they got their wires crossed. So zone it out into whatever makes sense, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 zones, whatever the case may be, and give those teams their assignments. It's important to delegate that and be crystal clear with what you're expecting, where they're to go, when they're to report back, and what that looks like when they report back. What information do I need? Do I need GPS coordinates? Do I need pictures? Are we talking about, like I'm using debris as a scenario right now, but your buildings, your public buildings, your facilities maintenance staff, and to what extent can they get in and do these assessments? Your preliminary ones are very usually brief. I'll even say maybe a windshield type survey, which is just to get an idea, get your arms around what are we looking at here? Is it as bad as we thought it was going to be? Or is it not? Did we dodge a bullet? Maybe it's not as bad. Or in some cases, oh, wow, we weren't expecting this. I mean, we're seeing some significant damages in areas or different departments maybe that we weren't expecting. It's important to get that information. Like you've heard everybody say it. It's important to do it on the front end of the disaster and at the beginning. And you're going to be asked for, and you're going to be required to provide more and more information. So the quicker you can identify those damages, get them identified, and then move into the next phase, whether it be with your own force account labor, whether it be contractors, whatever the case may be, to start getting those estimates, start getting those numbers coming in as quickly as possible.
Matt, you and I have been on a couple of disasters here, and the Cat 5s, no brainer here, but it's those Tropical Storm Cat 1s that are really the most challenging, because you show up there and you hear hurricane, everything's, adrenaline's running, you're hyped up, you've been, kind of waiting things out, and you go out there, and a lot of times it's been a sigh of relief in some cases. But I want to tell people to make sure you're accounting for things in people's backyards. I know that is like something silly, but I mean, it's always the backyards. There's always stuff coming out. Could be good junk. Could be, that's not debris, but sure looks like it. Or it could be stuff, leaners and hangers, whatever it is. But, again, just be diligent about capturing that information. And again, floods are really hard, but when it comes to hurricanes and wind events, you kind of know what's out there and capture that. Again, you got to have that insurance information out there, insurance policy. I think that insurance policy, that picture there, looks like a short one. I've seen some of those insurance policies that are out there, but that is part of the assessment process and something you're going to need to provide quickly to FEMA and then their team. So with actually at 10:45, we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that you come back refreshed and really, you know, engaged in this process, because public information is such a tremendous part of the debris removal operation. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break here. It's 10:45. So I'm gonna ask everybody to join back at 10:55, and we will restart and talk through some public information strategies following disasters. Thanks for everybody's attention. If you want to ask some questions during the break, something comes to you, please pop those in the chat and we'll address those before we get into the next phase. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. All right. Thank you so much for welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us here. We certainly do appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I mean, I think it's fantastic. We have such participation from all over the state of Texas, not just communities in the Houston-Galveston area, but up in the Panhandle, up in the Golden Crescent, some of the areas around South Texas, and in the central part of the state. So truly, again, debris management is a statewide challenge when it comes to disasters, and one that I think a lot of communities can learn from each other on, as well as, again, partners in the private sector. So some key considerations in public information. We're going to be talking about how to get that information out to those residents and those individuals who are impacted by the disaster, and some ways to approach that. So again, objective. Let's talk about that. How do we get information out to the public? But then more importantly, again, we're really seeing a lot more mediums and avenues to do this. How do we receive information about how we're doing? I think we're going to be talking about social media, some other ways. Probably in previous years, you just saw the angry person who showed up at city council or at county commission meetings if they weren't happy. But now I think more than ever, you're seeing that information in real time being able to be captured and know how you're doing. And when it comes to the public information, what we do and we recommend is identifying a public information officer just dedicated to debris management, or an individual part of your team who is your joint, whether it's Joint Information Center, whether it's the debris public information officer, someone within a department, or whether it's someone from the private sector, but who is responsible for dealing with the media, dealing with inquiries, drafting press releases, and again, some basic information out there that can talk about the who, what, when, where, how of debris management. Again, that joint information system, including the plans and protocols, and again, who is all responsible. And Brian, you've been a part of that planning process for many jurisdictions, and there's some common themes, some common recommendations that you would make, especially tied to debris management in this joint information system.
Yeah, so coordinating planning among all the different partners. It's really important that everyone is saying the same thing and has a shared message. If different ones are saying different things, the media can jump on that and likes to harp on any kind of inconsistent information that's being provided. So, sharing information, hey, this is what, I'm going to be giving out this information. Here's what we're going to be sharing. When I worked with the state, that was one of the things I did before I push any information out. I'd send it out to the regional partners first, so they had it first, and so they knew what was going to go out. And so that way, if the media called them with a question, they kind of already knew what the message was going to be if there was a follow-up question. So the joint information system, is a really important aspect. So all the different partners who are going to be involved in pushing out that information, it may even be your solid waste people, because people may be contacting them for information. And so keeping them in the loop on what the message is, as well as the other departments in your jurisdiction, again, the elected leaders and others, making sure that everyone's in that system and is in the loop on what the message is going to be, and when updates are going to be provided. Those kind of things can be very important to having a successful public information system for your debris management operation.
Hey, listen, and I'll tell you, start dates and stop dates are the two things that we see most commonly jumbled up. Again, whether it is, between a city and a county, or a city and a city. Well, I mean, Shelbyville is going on till the 23rd, and we're only going to the 19th. And you know, again, how you communicate that and what you do to say to that is truly important through the Joint Information System. Again, Joint Information Center is that location of where that information resides. And again, that could be at an emergency operations center, but more importantly, could be more long-term. And what you're looking here is you're looking at those long-term activities, debris and housing. Okay. I mean, those are really your two biggest long-term impacts within the community. When's the debris picked up and how am I going to get back into my house? Am I going to be in a hotel? Am I going to be dealing with insurance, FEMA DRCs, all those sorts of things? That all is going to go together and for a lot longer than just an emergency operations center that's out there. So disseminating the message, I mean, I think we're all very familiar with that process. You have the city of League City there and their Facebook page and how they were able to communicate with jurisdictions about where to set up information. We're seeing a ton more in the way of social media. And, you know, I know, Matt, you've been really working a lot with Lake Charles and Calcasieu Parish and some of those southwestern Louisiana communities. I mean, what would you say as far as, you know, social media and how, you know, some of these communities have approached that for the debris management process?
Yeah, for sure. It's like John mentioned, the Lake Charles got hit extremely hard with Hurricane Laura. Not only that, the follow-up storm with Tropical Storm, it was either Delta or Zeta, can't remember. But then they had the ice storm, the impacts there, and then just recently, as of a couple of weeks ago, got hit with some additional flooding. So they've definitely had their plate full as far as disasters go. But they have done an incredible job with their public information. In particular, their social media campaign. The areas there, not just the parish, but also Lake Charles, the city, and also the surrounding cities there in the area, have all done a great job coordinating together and putting out a very good, very clear, very consistent message, which is so important. Like John mentioned, it's in the age we live in today. It's social media. Everything is social media. That's what everybody relies on nowadays. You know, I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't put TikTok on here. That's my personal favorite. John's. You
have quite the TikTok following. I know that for a fact. You should see him there with his selfie and in front of a debris pile.
Yeah, no, we joke about it, but it's true. These TikTok's a very good example, but you've got these social media apps where you can, and it can just be a minute long video or whatever the case may be, but you don't need a lot of time to put out a good message. If there's an issue or a topic that you want to address, you know, pretty quickly and pretty cleanly, you know, go on one of these social, like Twitter, for instance. It's incredible, that Twitter feed, and you can just build off that same feed. So you have the past information that you put out there and you can just build upon that. It's incredible. Of course, Facebook is very important. A lot of these areas, you'll see the city or the county has their own Facebook page, which ends up becoming more like a discussion forum or a discussion thread where people can ask questions. You know, and as opposed to going back and answering these same repetitive questions that you're getting time and time again, you can refer them to your Facebook page. Say, look, we've got a great FAQ there, and it's going to answer a lot of these questions that you have. You know, this could be a full-time job for a staff of 10 in some instances. And I know you don't have the staff for that. And even if you did, they've got more important things to do. You know, so they rely heavily on these social media campaigns. And of course, having somebody that's familiar with them and how to use them effectively is crucial. Here's something else I want to just talk about briefly, though, is you also got to look at what is your community made up of? Obviously, the older you know, citizens, the older, you know, constituents in your area, maybe primarily or like a retirement community, they're not familiar with social media. And if they are, they don't pay attention to it. They don't care. They rely more heavily on your traditional media, whether it be TV or newspaper, that sort of thing. Of course, you've got the website, but a lot of people don't even know how to utilize the website. They don't know how to access it, even if they did have a computer available to them. Something else I'll throw in here too, something to be cognizant of, especially in some areas in Texas, is do you have a heavy contingency of foreign, maybe Hispanic, constituents there, where you need to do all of your media, whether it be TV or social media, Facebook. You have to do it in 2 languages, English and also Spanish. You have to be able to get this message to as many people as you can as quickly as possible. And I can't say this enough, it's got to be a clear and consistent message. And that's what's so important. The coordination between the local governments is critical in making sure that everybody's aware of what that message is, what it's going to be. If it changes, what is it changing to and when? Like John said, we hear it every single storm. When are you picking up my debris? Is it, I need a date, or when are you going to stop picking up debris? When's the final pass? Those are all questions that you're going to get, and you're going to get hammered by them. Usually at the beginning of the storm, right after the storm, maybe these residents are just concerned about getting in their homes. They don't have power. They don't have water. They've got bigger fish to fry, if you will. But as soon as all the power starts coming back on and people they're moved back into their house, they're getting comfortable again, that's when you're going to get inundated with the debris questions. They haven't come by my house. I saw a truck on the next street over, but then they didn't come to my street. Why? Or they picked up the pile of vegetation in front of my house, but they didn't pick up the construction and demolition debris. Why did they do that? Why did they pick up their neighbor and not me? That's when you're going to start getting all of these questions is after, people are back in their homes, things are returning back to normal. That daily reminder of that debris pile sitting in front of their house, you're going to get inundated with those questions. And you have to be prepared for that. Something else we've utilized quite frequently, and I always encourage local governments to do so, is set up a hotline. Set up a dedicated phone line that citizens, residents can call into. They can obtain information. They can ask questions. If you don't have the staff or the capability of doing that, bring in somebody that does. That's something that we do. We offer as a part of our services. We'll set up a hotline for you, and we will staff that hotline for whatever hours you want. In some cases, it's 24 hours a day. And you're going to have somebody that these residents can pick up the phone and call and get somebody on the other line. And somebody that may not have all of the answers, but they can take those questions and they can get the answers and follow back up with these people, which in my experience, that's the most important thing. Some of these communities, it's like they just ignore it and they think it'll go away, and it won't. And it just makes the problem just that much more difficult. And then you have these keyboard warriors that will go onto Facebook and so on and so forth. It's very important to make sure that you're engaging with the residents, you're answering their questions, and you're getting that information, like John said, not only from you out to the general public, but also taking that feedback back from the general public.
Keyboard warriors, Matt. I would also like to call them keyboard cowards. Sometimes get to anonymous, and they put some pretty nasty stuff out there on about whether it's debris management or what have you. But again, CTF, controlling the flow of information. And again, some of those key aspects that Matt had mentioned. Aaron Livingston with the question here. Yes, Aaron.
All right, so he may have kind of answered this, but the person did want more information. So they said during the ice storm, they didn't have power and they also didn't have cell service. And so social media did not work as a way to get information out to them personally. So there were others in that circumstance as well. So they're wondering, what are the options for communication when it's a situation like that?
Yeah, Matt, I know you've recently been in it with Hurricane Laura down in Southwest Louisiana. Great question. I know cell service. I remember driving up and down I-10 where cell service is a premium. I know we've had this problem. How did they address this when you don't have the social network available?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, it's we're seeing it more and more. We saw it with Hurricane Laura, and we also saw it with Hurricane Michael in the Panama City area with the devastation that it brought with it. Was in some cases, in some cell phone carriers, there was zero service. It wasn't like I had a little bit of service. It was none, zero. So what you got to do there is, it's a great question, first of all, and this is one of your plan B, if you will. If this does happen, what's going to be our fallback plan? I'll tell you the most important people. I think we had a picture up there a little while ago of the media war room in an EOC. The most important people in that room, in my opinion, are the radio folks. A lot of times, you may not have TV, you may not have social media, whatever the case may be, but in a lot of cases, you do have the radio. You have the emergency radios, people have access to those. And that is the most effective way, in my opinion, when you do have that complete blackout, no power, no internet. You've got to rely back on your more traditional methods, which in some cases, could be newspaper, whatever that may be, but also the radio. To me, that's the answer that I've seen most in the communities that I've worked with. Those radio folks and getting that information and feeding that information to them. I've even had some scenarios, not with Tetra Tech, but when I was with local government, where they would bring me on in the mornings or 2 or 3 times a day, and I'd go, sit on a radio show and answer questions. You just gotta have that plan, that backup plan. But radio to me is probably the most reliable.
And you can find Matt from 7 to 9 a.m. on K. He's given up his radio days to chase his career, dream of debris management. But I mean, that's it. I mean, coordinating with the VOADs, passing out flyers, radio. I mean, I think that radio, when we do recruiting for our activities, radio is the number one thing. And so I think that's a good way to approach it. Obviously, debris instructions, something that H-GAC had spearheaded a couple of years ago. There's some basic tools here for pushing information out and separating debris. This is both English and in Spanish that's available. And again, keep it simple. This is KISS principle type stuff. Tell people tell them what you told them, tell them again. Again, how to separate some of these piles. In some cases, it's not always available, but again, the big ones are household hazardous waste, garbage, keeping away vaults, fire hydrants, those sorts of things. These are some of the key messages that are available, and we've seen, again, very successfully implemented after disasters. Now we're going to turn it over to Carl Masterson. I'm going to bring up a video that H-GAC did a couple of years ago, filmed right here in the Houston area. Carl Masterson helped us do this video, and someone who was with H-GAC but had a lot of time on the stage in the Houston, in and around the Houston area. So, but this is something that's on YouTube, and so I'll turn it over to him.
Nobody expects a disaster to occur, and certainly not in our own neighborhood. While we might not be able to prevent disasters, all of us can help speed up the recovery from the latest one. Debris removal contractors have been hired to collect disaster-generated debris by your local government. Debris removal crews aren't allowed to come onto your private property. So it's important that you set your debris along the right-of-way and separate it according to debris type. If you're not sure where the right-of-way is on your property, it will generally be the area between the street and the sidewalk, or the street and the back of the ditch, or the street and a utility pole or fire hydrant. If you're still unsure, place the debris as close to the street as possible without going onto the pavement, and keep the piles from going more than about 10 feet onto your property. Be sure to avoid stacking debris against trees or poles, or on top of fire hydrants, utility boxes, or storm drains. Okay, now that you know where to put debris, let's talk about what debris is eligible for removal. You must make a separate pile for each type of debris. Mixing debris types may cause the debris removal crews to skip your house. It is important to remember that bagged debris and your regular household garbage are not eligible to be collected by the disaster debris removal crews and need to be kept in a separate pile. The types of debris that are eligible for removal are vegetative. This includes things like limbs, branches, or logs. Construction and demolition. This includes drywall or other building materials, fencing, and carpets or furniture. Appliances, which are also referred to as white goods. This includes things like washers and dryers, hot water heaters, or refrigerators. Make sure you secure it before putting it on the right-of-way to avoid curious animals or even kids getting into them. Electronics. This includes things like computers, televisions, VCRs, stereos, or other electronics that have a cord. Household hazardous waste. This includes things like paints, oils, batteries, pesticides, or cleaning supplies. Debris types are collected separately and sometimes a few days apart. So don't worry if the first truck you see doesn't pick up all your debris. Also, avoid parking your car or placing a dumpster in front of a pile of debris, making it inaccessible for removal. Following these guidelines will allow the debris removal contractors to move through your neighborhood efficiently. Proper curbside debris separation means a speedier recovery for our community. We're all in this together.
All right. Thank you, Carl, for that. Great. And there's a 3 and a 1 minute video, or maybe this is some inspiration for you to do something within your community. But again, I really think it's TikTok, it's Twitter, it's short bites of information. It's, again, you got these avenues where you're able to provide information, but again, it's also radio, it's also print media. So you have to be aware of those multi-generational gaps and how they consume the media. How they consume media. Another thing is handling sensitive topics. And, I think this is a really important piece in big disasters. And I think it's becoming more prevalent and more pronounced. And again, answering that information of who's affected, who cares, what is happening. Again, some of these basic, elements. And we certainly see this in debris management, whether it is handling a certain population, like those with limited English proficiencies, or a certain pocket of, the area that has been, had issues with government distrust or what have you, potentially issues with questionable immigration statuses, something along those lines, having that information. Or we've also seen it with a death in the operation. How are we going to handle that? We've had a health and safety incident, and all this information is super important. So again, planning the content and the message, again, if it is a health and safety issue or potentially, some other challenging aspect of the program. Again, you can see here, I think there is some training out there. Maybe another issue is you're not your community, or there's a public perception that things aren't moving fast enough, that you're on your heels. There was a scathing article or a challenging city or county commission meeting, which beat up the contractor or beat up you as the project manager about the debris operation. I've certainly seen that. I mean, Matt, I know you've seen a lot of debris operations go really well, but again, I know you've seen some ones that needs improvement, and any strategies, anything to communicate to the audience here about handling those sensitive issues.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wish it was all good, positive news all the time, but it certainly isn't. Some storms worse than others. But one thing I'll say, and I said it a little while ago, I'll say it again, is it's so important to not sidestep these issues. It's so important to not ignore them with the hopes of them just going away. Well, let's not address that. I don't want to get into that. Let's just leave it alone, and maybe in the next 2 or 3 news cycles, it'll fall off the radar. Be proactive and address these concerns. Address them right up front, head on. And that's the way that you can help control that narrative. Okay. When you get away from, when you ignore it or you sidestep the issue and you never really address it, that's what ends up happening is you're allowing other people to control that narrative. And that's just not something, it's hard to get back control once that happens. So something that I always encourage anybody that I talk to, any of my clients, I encourage them to address it in right up front, get in front of it. Once again, put together those questions that you just saw on the last slide there. Determine what is the issue, how we need to address it, what are we going to say, what are we going to not say, who's our audience, who does this impact or affect. Get that information, put together a very clear and concise message, and put that out there. Find some of those, whether it be local staff or whether it maybe be a mayor or a council person or a commissioner that's being invited to on a local media show or to do an interview live on the 5 o'clock news this evening. Take that opportunity to not shy away from it, but use that opportunity, feed them these issues and feed them the talking points and feed them give them the capability to address these issues and address them head on. And that's the way you're gonna squash these, if you will. But, I've seen some horror stories, I'll be honest, some failures in the public information. And I'll tell you, it doesn't go away. And it's like a wildfire, and then it gets out there and then the community all piles on board. And then all of a sudden you have Facebook discussion boards or pages set up to these issues. And it's just not, it's a lot more difficult at that point to regain control. So get ahead of it, direct that narrative and take these opportunities. A lot of people shy away from using, say, the politicians, if you will. Use it as a tool. And that's what I always did. I would meet with my commissioners, my city council people, whatever the case may be, and say, hey, I know you're going on the news. Here's some things that would be really helpful if you would help me get this information out there, and give them the talking points and enable them to address those things and address them head on. I'll tell you, I've seen some good things and some bad things, but the ones that take these bad situations and turn them around, they can turn them into positives pretty quickly.
Matt, I mean, and with such real-time data at your fingertips, there's no shortage of information out there, right? I mean, from truck locations to debris. I memean, how have you seen some communities, again, address those challenging issues with, real-time information?
Yeah, so I mean, you heard John and the team mention technology earlier, but I mean, the debris monitoring world is no different. I mean, the amount of technology and the advancements in the technology at our fingertips nowadays is incredible. Our system, our ADMS, our automated debris management system, it gives us the ability to give real-time locations of trucks, real-time locations of monitors. We can track these piles down to an exact address on a street. If you had a scenario, a neighborhood, or even a single resident that said, hey, this happened on my street, I can go back and revisit that issue. And I can say this truck number with this truck driver was on this street last Tuesday at 1:20 p.m. And, maybe we have what we call an incident report on that. And yes, you're exactly right. The truck did take out your mailbox. It's been notated. We've already communicated this to the contractor. They're in the process of remedying that situation. The technology and the information at our fingertips is incredible. And the people and the not just from our side, but also the local government side, the people that take that information and use it to their advantage, you're the positive information and the response that we're getting on that is incredible. And a lot of times you can get out ahead of some of these issues as far as why aren't the trucks here yet? I haven't seen the first truck. Are any of them here? You can start spitting these numbers at them and these facts and backing it up with some good, reliable information. And it's an incredibly useful tool at your fingertips.
And Matt talked about social media here, and it can be a great tool for communication, but it can be it's a double-edged sword here. So you've now handed Miss Kravitz a microphone, and that's now in the through Twitter or what have you next door, and you have this middle tweet, if you will, from a tornado a couple of years ago up in Collin County, which is right north of Dallas. And, essentially it was, hey, Collin County sets tornado drop off. And she didn't particularly like that. She wanted curbside service and took to social media on that. But then again, you got work sessions showing progress, and you have those tools. And again, staying out in front of them, I think, is a big piece of this. So, Matt, we've talked outreach strategies here. I mean, I know from a debris perspective, how do you feel like with somebody from the private sector being to handle that, or you really see a lot of this with public sector and who they assign for this task?
Yeah, so it can be a whole host of things. Obviously, every local government is different, some larger than others, some more financially comfortable than others. In some instances, there's a whole team of a PIO office, if you will, with a public information officer at the helm and multiple people underneath that person, whether it be formulating social media posts, responding to questions, producing and directing a radio show, producing, in some instances, some of these local governments have their own television studios. They have the ability of putting out their own, 30-minute episodes, if you will. In some instances, it's no issue at all. And there's multiple people there, and the ability to do that is obviously it's there and available. In a lot of cases, though, just as many as are prepared or do have that capability, a lot of them don't. Maybe it's a single individual that just, you have your daily duties already assigned, and now you've been dropped with, or these other responsibilities have been dropped on you, and now you're overwhelmed. And now all of a sudden the social media pages and the social media posts are not happening as frequently as they should. It's important to have a plan B, and you'll hear us say that numerous times throughout this, but, identify another 2 or 3 people on your staff internally that could take some of that load off of the public information officer, whether it be maybe a social, maybe a solid waste person, maybe that's familiar with social solid waste is one of those scenarios where you kind of always have some angry residents out there about getting missed garbage or whatever. Maybe there's some staff on that side that can help take some of that load off. And in some scenarios, it makes sense to bring in an outsider. Bring in an outside consultant and give that to them and allow them to handle this stuff for you. It's just one less thing you have to worry about. With that being said, you still have that responsibility of feeding the information to these people. So you still have to have one, in some cases, 2 or 3 people that have been identified, know their role, know what's expected of them, and in the time of need, easily called upon to fulfill these roles and to fill any gaps that there may be.
I think this is a great demonstration here on this slide to talk about what those activities are. So as you plan for the season, take these into consideration. And again, it might be prescriptive messages, or heck, it might just be identifying the person. And based on my experiences, that's the person who left the room when they were making those assignments. So just be aware of that. And again, this is what they're going to have to do. Correcting the information, safety messages, instructions regarding setup procedures, setting up the call center. I mean, you talk about the call center thing, Matt. I love the call center. It gives a place, I like talking to a real person. Call me old fashioned. I like talking to a human on the other end of the line. I don't like, these artificial intelligence. Hey, say your problem. And I try to say it 5 times and then I just end up hanging up. Again, but it's, again, I know you've seen call centers successfully implemented. I mean, not a huge lift here, but it's something to get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you from my experience, and I'm a firm believer in this. When you have these kind of events and it's impacted thousands, hundreds of thousands of residents, you're going to have some angry people. You're going to have some people with some issues that need to be addressed. In my experience, setting up a hotline or setting up some way for these people to voice their concerns, to voice their issues, talking to a real person, 8 times out of 10, these people are going to feel better. And when they hang up the phone, maybe their issue wasn't resolved, or maybe it didn't end the way they hoped for. But the fact that they were able to talk to somebody, talk through their problem, have a discussion there, just feel that they were being heard, a lot of these situations get dropped. You know, there are going to be those people that you're never going to make happy and they're going to hang up from you and they're going to call somebody else and they're going to keep calling every number that they can find on the website until they've yelled at everybody, or at least they feel like they've done their part in yelling at everybody. You're always going to have those, and there's not a whole lot you can do to appease those people. But I would say a bulk of these, the ability to talk to somebody and to feel heard is so important. And a lot of those will go away. And given the right opportunity, a lot of these hotlines, you know, these people are kind of the first line of defense, if you will. So they're taking the questions, they're taking the concerns. They've been given enough information to answer and to handle the frequently asked questions, if you will. In some cases, it's a follow-up phone call from somebody like myself or a project manager or an operations manager, or in some cases, we send one of our field supervisors out to go meet with this person face-to-face. These are all things that are, it's time consuming, it is for sure, but it's gonna help, it's gonna lessen load on the back end of this, which is those Facebook pages that are set up, you know, these mobs of people that are gonna show up to the city council meetings and the commissioner meetings. You know, having these people, listening to them, giving them the feeling that yes, your concern is being addressed, and yes, it's important to us, and here's the actions we're going to take. And like I said, in some cases, it takes an actual face-to-face visit to go spend some time with these people and address their concerns. Those are all things that are out there. They're available. Well, if you don't have the ability to do it yourself, look at bringing in outside help, outside contractors or consultants. In some cases, you know, somebody like us, your debris monitoring company, have the ability to help you with some of these things. It's out there. Identify those needs. That's very important to do is pre-season. Identify where are you short? Where's your staff fall short, or where are they going to need support? Identify those ahead of time and look at bringing in some help for them, especially maybe it's like a pre-positioned contract with no cost involved, but in the case that you need them and you can't activate that contract, then you've got the help there and you've got that support.
I love what you said there, Matt. 8 out of 10 are probably just going to call the complaint. And, you know, by you telling them, hey, we're working on it. This is how much we've collected. You know, this is how long it's going to take. Correct? No, ma'am, this is not correct. No, sir. You know, we are not doing this. Express gratitude. Say thank you for your help. I mean, all those things, again, basic stuff, but I think could go a long way. When it comes to the special needs populations, again, we're seeing a lot more of this occur across the spectrum of debris operations, and providing information to those individuals who may have disabilities or other functional needs or other language requirements. In fact, H-GAC has also put together information in English both and Spanish, but in other times, and we've seen this with HUD programs, where, you know, the action plans, which some of you may or may not be familiar with it, are now required to be in, you know, those multiple languages. Again, you look at large print, braille, audio, local media. I mean, again, think outside the box here. But you know, we're spending a whole, you know, segment on social media because it is truly that it'll make or break a program. And I mean, and again, make the victories sound very positive. And for those, you know, may have some challenges there, but you know, we're very much a proponent of getting the good information out into the hands of individuals. And so with that, I wanted to start with the third part of our webinar today, which is technology in disaster recovery. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Mooneyham. And Matt, please feel free to tell me to move this next slide. And we'll start off with drones.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, John. Yeah, you've heard us. It's a common theme today, and you're going to hear us talk more about it. And it's the technology and the changes in technology and the advancements in technology, of course, in our everyday world are just, you know, accelerating at an unbelievable rate. The debris world and the debris monitoring world is no different. One of the things I wanted to touch on here is the drone usage. Some of you may be very familiar with drones, some of you may not be. So I would just want to kind of touch on this. So the drones are obviously, you may hear them referred to as a UAS, an unmanned aircraft system. If you look at that picture there on the top right, that's one of our project managers there flying an example of one of our drones. Just as an example, us here with Tetra Tech, almost all of our project managers and or operations managers are licensed pilots for drones. That's becoming more and more popular. More and more people are getting into drones, learning how to fly them. And the amount of uses that you can utilize these to your advantage are just incredible. So some of the things that we use them for in particular, some of these capabilities are expedited damage assessments. So the ability to utilize a one-man team or a two-man team to fly these drones, the amount of area that they can cover. So what you're seeing is the lessened impact on the staff, whether it be your internal staff or whether it be a contractor's staff, the amount of area that you can cover with a fewer amount of people, which obviously results in lower costs across the board. It maybe some of these areas have not been cleared or cleaned to the point where it's super safe to get people in there yet. Well, in this case, you can set up in one location and fly these drones, and you can reach areas that maybe were inaccessible previously. You can cover miles and miles of work in areas and damage assessments in different areas, neighborhoods, whatever the case may be. A single person can do it and standing in a single location. Not only that, but you've got the HD capabilities of both the photo and the video of these drones, which is absolutely priceless. The ability to survey inaccessible areas is huge, more from a safety impact more than anything else. Just recently, we did a very large amount of waterways work for some clients. And a lot of these waterways, whether it be canals or drainage easeways, right-of-ways, easements, they're very hard to access. A lot of times they're in low-lying areas, swampy areas. So maybe not accessible by a human for sure. And in some cases, even difficult for equipment or other side-by-side type vehicles. They're just simply, it's inaccessible. And if it is accessible, it's unsafe to do so. So in that scenario, we will fly all of these. We will do all of our surveys, all of our assessments via drone. So once again, you've got a one or a two-person team that can go out and cover miles and miles of waterway very, very easily and very safely at the same time. Progress tracking is super important, especially in the debris world and the debris management world. So what we do is we utilize drones to take pictures of our DMS sites, our debris management sites. Prior to any work occurring, we will fly the drone 360-degree view, multiple angles, multiple heights, to truly encompass what this site looked like prior to any work being completed. And then we will take progress photos as the project continues. And as you move further and deeper into these projects, it may be every other day, it may be once a week, twice a week, it may be twice a month. Whatever the frequency that we think is necessary, we go out there and we'll take those progress tracking photos. It's so important to have, and FEMA is going to look for those as well, these progress photos. We've used it to measure debris piles. We've used it to document. In one case I had on one of my projects, we had a fire. Somebody actually came out and set fire to some of the debris in one of the debris management sites. And we needed to quantify that. So out of the total amount of debris that had been brought into that site, approximately how much of that debris was burned, So we used a drone to survey the damage, to assess the area, assess the situation. And then we were able to put a very good number that we felt good about, estimate on the amount of debris that was burned. That's just a simple scenario of ways we can use it. And then, of course, before and after comparisons. So going back to the waterway thing that I was mentioning earlier, you can fly these waterways, whether it be canals, man-made canals, or just natural drainage ways. You can take those work being completed. So you can document that, what it looked like before. And then, of course, after the work is completed, you can see what was done, to what extent it was done, and what it looks like now. All of these pictures, the documentation, and John and those guys that work on the kind of the other side of this, working with FEMA and the PA side of things, will tell you the more documentation you have, the better. The way that you can utilize this information and utilize the pictures to tell a story, to show that you maintained it previously. Using drones to take pictures of all your facilities as something that is becoming more and more popular. A lot of my clients are utilizing drones and the ability to use these drones to take pictures of all of your, sorry about that, to take pictures of your facilities, to take pictures of these and to document what they looked like, 360-degree views, what the status of the roof was. All of that, which is so important, you know, and then obviously after the storm, after the event, you can go back and look at these and try to clarify, you know, what was damaged, what was the status prior to the storm, and what is the status now.
And a couple of things, because I do think that progress tracking is a great way to use drones. We recently worked on a project in the city of Houston to remove some sediment from Lake Houston, and it was called the mouth bar. But you took pictures. You could see progress, especially out there with something that's far away, inaccessible area, or maybe it's a not very easily accessible area, and you see that thing shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, and you almost get like a time lapse from it. So really a nice way. I mean, you got the barge there, you got that piece of this. I think it's huge. One of the things I wanted to talk about, and maybe make a little bit of a left turn, which is expediting damage assessments. And we received a text question from Garrett Foskett, who is attending today's presentation, about the damage assessment process, and maybe some kind of revisiting that a little bit. I know we've already talking about it with UAS. I've asked Meredith Sanders to rejoin us here, and also we obviously have Valerie Blanton from the state of Texas, and wanted to. What kind of changes? We're hearing a lot of things. We're seeing a lot of things. Is there anything in writing? Again, maybe it's due to COVID, or maybe it's due to some of the other, implementation of the new delivery model that we're seeing on damage assessments. And again, how to best address that going forward?
Well, John, I definitely think that we are seeing a difference as far as damage assessments in the fact that the burden of providing the documentation is resting more and more on the applicant's shoulders. So in the past, you used to get a team from Fema, they'd come, you'd ride around together, you'd look at everything. That's not going to happen anymore because of COVID. Now, we don't know if that is a permanent shift, but we do know that while we are still in that world from COVID, that we can expect that no one's going to show up, at least for a storm, unless it's just like I've mentioned before, that Harvey level where they're deploying a large amount of people immediately. So for your winter storm or something like that, it's all on the municipality, the local government, to get the pictures and to complete those assessments on their own.
I'm on mute. That's the first time. We made it almost 2 hours, and I actually had to say it on myself here. You're on mute. I got that coffee mug there. Sorry. But that's the, Meredith, I think this is just, again, this global technology discussion that we're having here, that, listen, the COVID, I don't think some of these things about the true on-site work are going to continue. I mean, well, shoot, before we get into that campfire case study with UAS, but again, I know I'm making a little bit of a left turn, but I want people to understand in the audience that it starts with drones, it moves to Teams or Zoom, like we're doing here, webinar, and just even operationally. I know FEMA's looking at this. I mean, the cost of a hotel room, per diem, rental car, gas, travel back and forth. I mean, that's real money. And when you're talking about 1,000 program delivery grant managers or PDMGs, I just want people to understand that we may be moving more and more from damage assessments all the way through the process to a remote work type engagement in disasters, and having UAS and damage assessments. I think you need to, and again, burden of proof's on you. You want the grant, you get the information. And I mean, Meredith, I've seen, you know, UAS, I'm sure there's other technologies, but thanks for that.
You bet.
So Matt, we got the case study here, Paradise Wildfire. You want to go ahead and kind of show the audience what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this is just another example of, I kind of touched on the debris management side of things, and here's something that's a little bit different. So the campfire out in California a couple years back, and this is just an example of one of the tools that we have, and a case where we use drones to help solve a problem. So what we did is we identified the critical traffic issues for the purpose of truck routing. Okay, so what they wanted to do, our partners there, our clients there in California, Cal EOS, Cal Recycle, in conjunction with the Highway Patrol there in California, they wanted to see the truck traffic, and where these trucks were going. You had a huge influx of these, you know, semi-truck, double barrel hauler type vehicles, hundreds of them. And that can be a significant impact to your local traffic and the traffic flow in your area. It can affect things like traffic signals and so on and so forth. So what we did is we provided a system-wide view of the traffic flow and the vehicle progression. And what we did is we took drone footage and sent a drone up into the air and just set it in a single location, not moving, and just videoed these traffic signals and these intersections. And what we wanted to see was especially at peak times, most importantly, but what were the impacts here? It was traffic backing up in any one direction more than another. Were there any significant traffic incidents that we need to address? And a lot of this information was taken and used to make adjustments. So maybe we had to identify an alternate route for the trucks to utilize. Maybe it was something as simple as going out and making some adjustments to the timing of these traffic signals. But this is a perfect scenario where in the old days, in fact, I was did this in my local government experience, is you would do these traffic studies, and it literally meant, you know, 1, 2, 3 people standing on a street corner during peak times and making notes. Where were you seeing this traffic? Where was it coming from? Where was it going to? Where was the traffic backing up? You know, where was the primary flow trying to go, and where could it not go due to the disruptions? So as opposed to a 3, 4, 5 man team looking, you know, man hours out there for hours and hours on end, this was a single drone that was flown with probably a single operator, that we were able to catch thousands and thousands, if not millions of data points, and was able to take that use and that information and that data and take it to implement and solve some real world problems. I see Aaron popped in here. You got a question or something?
Yes, we do have a question.
All right. Perfect.
It says, in your experience, is there a time period that FEMA looks at for the precondition documentation photos as still being valid? Are photos 6 to 9 months prior to the event still sufficient to document precondition? Asking from a Harris County flood control perspective. Okay.
All right. And I'll let maybe John or somebody's maybe a little more qualified than me to answer this question. But in my experience, anything prior to the event, you know, with the understanding that nothing major changed. In other words, if you use a building as an example, there was no major modifications or additions to that building, I think it would be sufficient. But I'll let John chime in here.
I mean, the guy who's doing unmanned aircraft system traffic studies is not qualified to answer this question. No, by the way, this is great information, and I hope people can, you know, understand and appreciate kind of some of the things here. But I asked, you know, I would say from a you know, pre-storm photo, I think it's going to be reasonable. I think 6, you know, again, if it's on a hurricane season basis, I think that is, is good. I have seen FEMA make determinations on, you know, pre-site conditions up to a couple of years before. So I'll give you the example, okay? So Lake Houston and the sediment that was deposited by Hurricane Harvey, City of Houston wanted to approach FEMA about removing the sediment that was brought from upstream and deposited into Lake Houston. And so what the city did, along with some technical teams from Tetra Tech, is we went in and we looked at a 2011 bathymetric survey of the area in Lake Houston that was done by Texas Water Development Board. And then Another survey was done in 2018, plus doing some core samples, okay? And then we looked at the pre and the post and came up with some analysis. Now, FEMA and the Corps of Engineers did send that to a number of different technical folks, and they determined that in that case, yes, it was reasonable. The pre-site conditions from 6 years ago, because it, as a body of water, didn't change that much. And we also had those core samples to demonstrate that in the gradients and the coloring of the sediment that was in there, again, not to nerd out too much on you guys, but there was a couple of reasons why they were able to do that. Again, in the case of Harris County Flood Control District or anyone with bayous, channels, I think being able to do some of that on an annual basis, or when there is a major capital improvement for that facility, I think that's a really good plan. Now, again, initially there was a discussion of, well, if you didn't go out there the day before Harvey and the day after Harvey and do those core samples, we're not going to take it. There was that discussion. That's something that has to get overcome, but it's something that is very doable. Again, ideally, you're out there the day before the storm, okay? Hours before. But that's not realistic because we're boarding up windows and worry about life, health, and safety. But if there are some things that could be done in the immediate aftermath, I think you do that, or on an annualized basis. Meredith, again, I think reasonable is the key word here, but do you,
absolutely.
In writing.
So what I would say is one of the things that FEMA is going to look at first is, do you have an annual plan for assessment? And as long as you have if your assessment plan says we go out twice a year, we take these pictures, your pictures align with that, FEMA they accept that. So what we're finding more and more is they just want to be able to tie this back to whatever your policy and procedure is. And it's not necessarily a time frame thing. It just has to align with whatever your assessment program is. So make sure you have a written assessment program, have some photos and footage that aligns with it, and you shouldn't have a problem, but make sure it is within whatever frequency. So if you've had a minor event and then a major event, they're probably going to question that. If you do have any kind of minor event, go out and take some photographs after.
Thanks, Meredith. All right. And so, again, I think this is a really cool way. And these truck routing, what we were able to do in truck routing in real time really saved a lot of time and a lot of headache for residents. Matt, you want to talk about again, in Paradise, California, the scene of the campfire that destroyed over 16,000 structures. I know we were able to use drones for some other activities as well.
Yeah. So once again, going back to the California, to the campfire, just it's a great scenario, and one of the biggest events where we just had significant use of drones in many different ways and many different aspects of the job. So what you see here is we use the drones for the site assessment and pre-planning for debris removal crews. So as we're meeting with the client and as we're meeting with the contractor, and we're looking at these areas and looking at maybe scheduling out the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of debris removal from these parcels. Some of these parcels, it doesn't make sense to go out and visit each one of them and do an in-person, a team of 3 or 4 people to go meet on site for each individual parcel. So what we did is we went out and did pre-assessments and went out and took some pictures and some video so that you could see each individual parcel. You could see things like access. How are we going to access this property? What does the access look like? Maybe we need some specialized equipment to get in there. You can also see, like in that picture there to the right, you can kind of see this is on the corner of 2 intersecting roadways there in a neighborhood. What impacts are we going to need to make there? Maybe some additional traffic control is needed. So then you could schedule a 2 or 3 hour meeting with the client and the contractor, and you could look at, tens of properties at a time, as opposed to going out once again and using 2, 3 vehicles of teams of people going and trying to squeeze in maybe 5, 6, 7 properties a day. In this instance, within a couple hours, you could do 20, 30 properties and get a good feel for what's coming up and what obstacles you may have to overcome.
That's great, Matt. I've been there on those site visits in the Bolivar Peninsula, where you're going, you know, with the IRAs of the world, that for people going site to site. We're not going to do, or we don't have to do that. And I think you may do a couple of on-sites, but I think you've got technology like this to get moving. So before we get into asset tracking, I did want to do another 5-minute break here before we get into the rest of our presentation. We did have one track. And we got a comment from Valerie. Annual or sorry. I went a little off there. Just saw Valerie Blanton's comment. If you want to check out the chat there from the TDEM perspective on documenting facilities before. But we're going to take a short 5-minute break. It's 11:53 here. And we'll come back and then we will wrap up with the completion of technology and then going on to the best practices for the next year. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you shortly. All right, thanks so much, everybody. We are back. It is 10:58 on the dot, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Mooneyham, man of the hour, to bring us home and talk about asset tracking and some best practices for this year. So, Matt, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. And just to continue on this same theme, the technology, I just wanted to show you a couple other things, some technology advancements that we utilize. One of the things that we've been utilizing, and mostly out in California with the fire projects, is fleet tracking. So this is something that we can do relatively easy, relatively simple, at little to no cost. You can put this on your truck driver's cell phone. It's an app. It doesn't cost anything. If they don't want to do that, we can put it on one of our Android type devices, a simple phone. So it's not a high cost item. But what this is allowing us to do is collect millions and millions of data points. We're able to follow these trucks. We're able to follow them. What route are they taking? How much time is it taking? How much time is it taking from the site to the DMS site, or from the parcel, the work site, and back? What are we looking at round trips? How does this change throughout the day? Is it, in the mornings, is it faster? In the afternoons with more traffic, it gets clogged up. You can see where maybe the backups are happening and occurring so that you can make some adjustments, just like we talked about a little while ago with making some traffic adjustments, maybe new routes, maybe alternate routes, maybe making some traffic signal adjustments to accommodate these. So this is a simple way to collect, like I said, millions and millions of data points at little or no cost to anybody. And having that information and that at your fingertips is just absolutely incredible. So as we're doing this and we're tracking the fleet, here's just a couple of the data points that we're tracking: the speed, the location, the time, the truck number, the subcontractor number. Is it active or not active? Return times, directional location. So all of these, like I said, it's millions. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's millions of data points that are collected regularly, like I said, throughout the day. And you can see there, we can put that into a database. It gets exported into like an Excel spreadsheet for use. Also, from a visual standpoint, the mapping capabilities, some people are more of that visual type. They don't like looking at the Excel spreadsheets. So here's a way that you can visualize this, and you can use this, to your benefit, to help both from just a simple tracking all the way through, whether it be traffic, or maybe the California Highway Patrol is asking for some help or some more information on your trucks and the impacts they're having to traffic flow.
And listen, I would tell the audience here, we're telling you our solution. There's plenty of solutions out there that, you know, are low cost. These are low cost solutions, technology-based low cost solutions that can really help out. I mean, think back to Hurricane Ike, when, you know, we were scratching out things in pen and pad, and that was 2008. I mean, you know, got some team members that we joke, hey, that's so 2008 with each other. But listen, I mean, we're 2021. You could get some really easy stuff. Again, we've shown some, again, this is, again, the case study with Caltrans here, but I mean, really 546 million. There's your number, Matt.
There you go.
Really, really easy. And I think the possibilities are endless in what it's able to do. So, but yeah, I mean, I know a big game changer here, Matt, has been the ADMS. So why don't we go into that?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in. So I mentioned this earlier, but you'll hear me say ADMS. It stands for Automated Debris Monitoring System, Management System. It's a system used by us as the monitors to record the crucial information. And what this is doing is collecting all of the information that FEMA is looking for. So when you're talking about a debris PW and the reimbursement of the debris and the debris program, there's certain requirements, obviously, that FEMA wants to see. So what this ADMS allows us to do is our monitors in the field are collecting this information real time. We're collecting photos, we're collecting GPS coordinates, times, locations, and we use this tool. And when I say this tool, it's as simple as literally an Android phone. So the picture you see there on your right, it's a phone. It's a standard phone, just like you've got in your pocket. It's an app that goes on that phone. So you have the ability to, it's like I said, very simple. We're not talking about any kind of proprietary equipment or anything that's hard to access. This is off the shelf. You can go into any store and buy this Android phone, install this app on it, and you're ready to go. And what this does is this ADMS unit, it increases the efficiency ultimately and eliminates most of the errors. So what this is allowing us to do, unlike the days of old with the paper tickets and people out there, you know, writing these paper tickets and tearing off one of 7 carbon copies and which color goes to who, it avoids all of that. So it's all electronic. It decreases the amount of paper that we're generating. But more importantly, going back to the efficiency, what those paper tickets and what that system used to cause was hours and hours, if not hundreds and thousands of hours, reconciling those at the end of the day, at the end of the week, or at the end of the project, trying to compile all this information into one location, trying to QA, QC this information, identify errors, locate those errors, fix those errors. What this allows us to do with this electronic ADMS system, we're all of the data in the field from this debris management project as a whole, which can be millions and millions of cubic yards of debris. What you're doing is you're able to reconcile that data real time throughout the day, to the point where at the end of the day, you're getting a draft, you're getting a report of the day's operations, the day's activities. And for the most part, it's not 100%, but very, very close to almost fully QA, QC'd real data that you can utilize. And you're not waiting days or weeks or months to get this information. It's there at your fingertips at the end of each day.
You know, and again, for the audience's perspective, this automated debris monitoring system is really the standard in the industry now and has been adopted. I know there's apps out there you could look. A lot of the companies that are involved in this all have this. So, I mean, again, we're talking about things that we know about, but certainly this is something that is widely available in the industry and this is game changer type stuff. You know, as far as the business that we do, how we staff, and how the sausage gets made.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want anybody to think I use us, meaning Tetra Tech and our system, but all of the major monitoring companies in today's world all have something very, very similar. I'm familiar with a lot of them. I've seen them, I've used them, I've operated them. They're all very, very, very familiar. They're all very similar, and they all generate the same kind of information. So what you're doing here, this is an example of so this ADMS system and the software all correlates into also the GIS system that we utilize. So you're able to take this data, you can export it to an Excel spreadsheet, or you can export it into like an ArcGIS type GIS system. And so now you've got visually on a map. So what you see here is these pink squares, those are the trucks. So those are the real-time truck locations. So if somebody for whatever reason wants to know where truck number 103648 is, I can pull this map up and I can say he's over there on Oak Street picking up vegetative debris, as we speak. The green dots on this map are all of your load pickup locations. So we have the ability to change the colors of these dots. So we'll just assume, I don't know this one off the top of my head, but we'll just assume that is vegetative debris. So let's say the green dots are vegetative, the red dots are C and D, and this is all of the locations, all of the neighborhoods, all of the streets that have been hit so far. So once again, just the ability to have this information, the quantity of information that we have, but then the ability to have this at your fingertips at any time, giving you real-time information is so critical, so crucial, and the efficiency is just unheard of. Go ahead and move to the next slide. There you go. This is an example of what we were talking about just a minute ago with the debris pickup locations. So what you see here is what we were just talking about. So one of the color dots, the green, is going to be your vegetation, and the blue is going to be your C and D. So with the simple click of a switch, you can turn these layers on and off. You can toggle them on. I want to see this. I want to see that. I want to see both of them together. We have the ability to do this through all of the different debris classes. Vegetative, C and D are obviously the two biggest and the two that we see the most of, but we can white goods, HHW, leaners, hangers, stumps, any of those things. It's there at your fingertips visually. What this allows us to do also, it's so helpful in the closing out of these projects to make sure that we've hit everybody, to make sure no streets were left off. And at a quick glance, you can look at a certain neighborhood and say, yeah, we've covered that neighborhood. Not just once, but we've covered it 2, 3, 4 times. So clicking on one of these dots, it pops up the little, this is just from the city of Westlake, which is over there in the Lake Charles area and Southwest Louisiana. But you can see there the information that we're collecting. So you could click on that dot. It's going to show you the ticket number. So you can tie that down to an exact truck. Or to an exact ticket. It's going to have the date, the time, the client, the contractor, the subcontractor, and then it's going to have the truck number, the truck capacity. And if you were able to zoom on down, you'd see all the other additional information there. But all of those critical information, all that critical data that FEMA is going to be looking for. And I just saw a question pop up here from Andrea. It says, what does ADMS stand for? So it's Automated Debris Management System, or Automated Debris Monitoring System is what ADMS stands for. And so what this is allowing us to do also, I just mentioned it, but closing out these projects, it's so important to make sure that you didn't leave anybody out, that you've hit everybody, usually 2, 3 times, depending on the size of the storm and the impact. But what we're able to do is, as we're closing out these streets, the local government has published a final pass date and time. And after that, we're closing out streets. We hit them one more time. And once it's clean and clear, we'll turn them red like this. So you can keep track of the status of where we are in the project. What is the current status as of today or at the end of today? And how much does that leave us, left for the end of the project? Once again, using the same thing as with the load pickup locations with the trucks and the monitors, you've also got the same information for the DMSs. So debris management sites or TDMS or temporary debris management sites. We plug these into the system and you've got that information as well. So what you've got here is you've got the site name, the GPS coordinates, how many loads they took today. Out of those number of loads, how many cubic yards does that equate to? How much of that was vegetative, how much of that was C and D. And then you've got not just your daily statistics, but then also your job to date statistics. So you're constantly, you've got all of that information right there in front of you. And at any time, if somebody says, hey, how much have we hauled to the Lake Street DMS, within the matter of a couple of minutes, I can give you not only a quantity, but broken down between what type of material as well. And what we have here is the same thing that we've been talking about, but this is going to be what we call our leaner and hanger program. So hazardous trees, hazardous limbs, hazardous stumps. This is something else, obviously, that the debris management software will cover for you. It's collecting the same information you've got there. It's got the ticket number, the monitor, so who wrote the ticket, the date, the time, the GPS coordinates, the address, the service codes of what was it? Was it a hanger that was, 2 inches or greater is obviously the requirements, or was it a leaner in the unit rate price of say 6 to 12 inches? It gives you your unit count, your measurement, what zone it was, and how many photos are attached to that. So in the field, as the monitor is writing this ticket and taking those pictures, those are there with the click of a button, you can pull up not only the ticket information, but also the associated photos there. What that's allowing us to do is QA/QC that throughout the day. So we're not trying to 2 days later realize we made some mistakes and these photos didn't upload. If the data managers that are reviewing this on a daily basis, notice something right there in real time, we can fix it in the field. I talked about the geo portal is what we call it, but it's all of this data and it's coming back into the system, into our GIS system. And a lot of that, what it allows us to do is not only the city and county boundaries, which is obviously important. We want to make sure that we don't go out of bounds, that we want to stay within our boundaries, but it also allows us to determine these roads, whether they be state roads, local roads, city, county, if they're private and they're ungated or gated. This GIS system will allow us to see all this visually so that this information is available to everybody that's out in the field, not just the client and not just to the project management staff, but all the way down to the monitors in the field. They have a question, they're on a street and they think maybe they're out of bounds. They can pull this up on their phone and know right away, hey, this, get with the truck, we're out of bounds. We need to get back in bounds immediately. So once again, it's just the amount of information that's available to you at your fingertips. And once again, going back to it's all right there in your cell phone. It's the same cell phone that you carry all day, every day anyway. There's no additional cost to that. It's there at your fingertips. This is an example of the reports, just real quick. I'll just touch on this, the ADMS. So this is the nightly reports. So we have the capability, because of that real-time QA/QC that's happening throughout the day, either late that night or first thing the next morning, you as the client are receiving up-to-date information on where we are, what was yesterday or today's statistics, how much did we pick up today. Not only that, but we also have the job to date statistics as well. So you're having that real-time information, and this ties back to your public information campaign, communicating this to the general public. It's just so useful to have that at the drop of a hat to update your county commission or your city council. You can pull up these, they're good looking reports, they're easy to read, and the amount of information there is just incredible. So this goes back to what we were just talking about. John chimed in there. Obviously we speak to Tetra Tech in our system because that's what we're familiar with, but these are the questions that you need to ask your vendor, or these are the requirements that you need to plug into your RFP if you're going to be putting out a pre-positioned contract. These are some things you need to think about and include. Is what capacity do you have to deploy an ADMS? Like John said, it's all standard in today's monitoring world. This is nothing crazy, but you do need to make sure that they are proposing to use an ADMS system and that it's electronic. In today's world, you hear about it every day in the news, it seems like, but the security of that data is very, very important. Where is it stored? Is it secure? How far into the future will we keep that data and have access to that data? Can we integrate the information on our website? That goes back to our public information campaign. And hey, is there any aspect of this that we can upload to our Facebook page or to our website to help keep the general public in the loop as far as where we are and where we're going? Obviously, who owns the data? Is the system easy to deploy? That's important. You want to make sure that there's no proprietary hardware or hard to get software or hardware that maybe like you're seeing now with today's world with the chip shortage. Hey, I can't get these tablets or these phones that I have to have. Everything that we use in our system is off the shelf, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. And then what contingency plans are in place if the system or the cell towers are down? Obviously, with what we do, that's a very real possibility. So our capabilities, at least from Tetra Tech's point of view, we have used multiple cell phone providers. So say Verizon is maybe down, but AT&T is up, we'll utilize our AT&T network and that software. Also, if there's no cell tower coverage at all, what are your capabilities there? And we have remote satellite type things that we can use to get that data to make sure that we're still communicating effectively. So these are all just some points, some talking points. If you already have a vendor, it doesn't hurt to one of your pre-season meetings or conferences to ask these questions and just pry a little bit deeper into what they're doing and how they plan to accomplish it. I always suggest getting involved. Learn the system, know the system, monitor your monitor. Don't just take their word for it, but get involved and ask questions and learn the process from start to finish.
Obviously, with the things we focused on today with is drone technology and automated debris monitoring systems, we've moved from 2008 being seen at like a Dr. Strangelove type thing, and now we're more into the Minority Report type of technology. And, pretty soon I think we're going to go, some HAL 9000 is going to replace me up here, which I'm okay with. Hopefully I'll be at a beach somewhere, which would be fantastic. But you see this, and I think you got to know, this is rapidly changing. I mean, even from 2017 to 2021, I mean, we're seeing things rapidly evolve, and more uses for technology. We're going to be in Teams. We're going to be in Zoom. You got to expect that. We're going to be doing site visits using handheld devices, and we're already doing some of that now, where you're going to mitigate. There's some other crazy technology that we're seeing in whether it's case management, whether it's call centers. All this stuff is driving innovation into the business, and it's really pushing out these high labor type activities and high labor tasks and replacing them with technology solutions to really speed up the process and provide greater efficiencies into the program. So with that, we're gonna spend the last 10 minutes or so talking about best practice in preparing for this next hurricane season. So number one is, again, look to opportunities to divert the landfill debris from the landfill. Look at what you got, where's it going? Again, is it going to go to a mulch facility? Is that available? What do you have at your fingertips? Who's your landfill operators, recyclers, and coordination with your solid waste contractors? Again, going back to your number one is look at your reduction operations, reuse operations, see what's out there. Just, again, putting some thought into it. And again, remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, especially when it comes to recycling and diverting debris. Number two, pre-negotiate those contracts. Look at putting out your, again, from we know that from about March through the end of June, that's proposal season. That's when a lot of people are putting their proposals out. And I would highly encourage you, if you haven't looked at that, look at some opportunities, save time before a disaster, and go ahead and put that out there. Select your contractors and meet with them. Again, avoid those contracting minefields. Number three, look at full and open competition. Conduct those necessary steps to ensure the use of minority, women-owned business enterprise and labor surplus firms. Again, straight from 2 CFR 200. Again, don't include contractors that are building the specifications or statements of work or any of the requirements. Again, there's enough out there. Plagiarism is welcomed in procurement. And, people are out there saying, hey, send me this. We've seen a lot of that. And then, again, maintain those written standards of code of conduct in your procurement process and during the vendor selection process. Again, I go 4A here, keeping those records available, providing sufficient detail, making sure they're electronic and backed up so that you know why you selected them, what are they going to be doing, what are they going to be doing for you? Is it a contract, a task order? Justify and communicate why the contract was rejected, and describe how you incorporated price into your selection process. Number five, debris management sites. Know where they go, know what you're going to do. Talk landfills, final resting place, but what's that temporary spot? Where are you going to put it? And find that in the community. Know how you're going to document force account expenses. We talked earlier, I'll hit it again. Your work order system, knowing what's out there. It's knowing your 214s, you got the ICS activity log, your disaster timesheets, how that engages with your Chronos, all those sorts of things. Know how that process works. There's, again, a lot of information out there on the web about that. Number six, have a communications plan. We really spent some good quality time on public information, gave you a lot of relevant examples in there. Think about that, let that marinate, simmer in your plan. What does it look like? Who's going to be doing it? And what are they going to say? The worst thing is not saying enough, but it's even worse is saying the wrong thing. So keep that message consistent. and stay positive and stay forward thinking. And then finally, number 7 is develop and maintain an all hazards debris management plan. Again, some really nice elements of this plan. Again, it's a well-worn path. I mean, you've got great people like Valerie Blanton up at the state who's reviewed a lot of these plans. You have people in the industry who have done a lot of debris management plans. And again, having the planning process and pulling everything together, these are the key elements that are just so, so important. And again, 7A is form that planning team, bring your different disciplines together, because Lord knows they are going to be involved in the process if, well, really when, not if, you are going to be working through some of these debris programs. Well, sorry, you got a couple more. Is use of residential drop-off sites. We have a really nice model there. The residential drop-off sites being a great way for people to self-haul, get it out of their front yards. And again, Thurston Howell III and Lovey Howell have that manicured lawn with the zoysia grass on it, and they don't want that debris standing there for more than a few moments. So you got to give them a place to go and take that debris. And residential drop-off sites, which could be parking lots or different areas within the community, are a great way. Think about that when you're putting your plan together and your operational plan. Again, linking with volunteers, huge advantage for communities who are coordinated with Baptist Men, Samaritan's Purse. We talked about crisis cleanup. For those of you who don't know what crisis cleanup is, it's a great website where residents who have debris generating events can register themselves, and that gets pushed out to the communities and volunteer organizations to help them get that debris cleaned up and pushed to the right of way. And identifying what ways they can help you with debris management, finding out from them what areas, checking in with your EOC, let them know what homes have been completed, and then documenting their hours and activities. And then coordinating with state agencies like the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, who has so many great tools out there. It's got the regulatory guidance from May 2020. You have the website there, which provides directions to permitting these debris management sites, which is an essential part. We didn't get to talk about it, but again, knowing where to go is half the battle there when it comes to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And then you have the State of Texas Catastrophic Debris Management Annex to the EOP. Something to probably, again, something that fits into both your changes for this year, but also looking at the future. It outlines, know what the state's role is, whether it's Texas Division of Emergency Management, Texas Department of Transportation, GLO, General Land Office, commit to Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. All those are outlined there. I highly encourage you to click that link, download that, have that off the shelf, familiarize yourself with it. Again, hot off the press, December 2019, and some really good information. So with that, we're right on schedule, right on time. And if anybody wants to ask any questions at this time, if you want to put them in the chat, we will take those questions.
Just a reminder for everyone, you can type your questions right in the chat box, or you can use the raise your hand function and we'll ask you to unmute and you can ask your question right out loud.
Oh, well, thank you, Rebecca. We appreciate the positive feedback, and certainly we appreciate everybody being here today. We had over 75 people here on today's presentation, and we can't thank you enough. And again, just, again, stay on the cutting edge of this. There's things that are rapidly changing and obviously impacting our region and our communities. So thank you very much for being here. And another kudos to H-GAC for all of their hard work and putting this on and being a leader in information to the communities at large. Thank you very much.
While we wait for people to type in questions in the chat, I wanted to remind everyone that we have been recording the webinar. As long as Zoom hasn't failed us and the recording comes out okay, we'll be posting it to the H-GAC YouTube channel within the next few days. So if there's something you want to go back and hear again, you'll be able to do that. Or if you have a colleague that wasn't able to attend, you can tell them about it. We also have a quick survey for you to fill out. The link is in the chat box. Thank you, Andrea. And we'll also be sending it out via email. I did want to give a final thank you to the Tetra Tech team for the great webinar this morning. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure others have too. And I want to thank everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
John, I don't want to take away any of your time, but 2 minutes is not a lot of time, but it's a long time to sit quietly. So I think if we don't have any more questions,
Okay.
I think we might be able to call it a day and let everyone go about their.
Yes. All right. Well, yep. I know that sounds good. I appreciate it. Hopefully we answered a lot. Please feel free to reach out through H-GAC or to us directly, and we'd be more than happy to help. Thanks, everybody.